They rose from dust and vanished into legend. Deep in the jungles, beneath windswept deserts, and hidden beneath oceans, lie the silent remains of civilizations that once pulsed with life, knowledge, and power. They carved cities into stone, aligned temples with the stars, and shaped entire landscapes, only to disappear as if swallowed whole by time itself. No warnings, no survivors, just echoes. Historians offer theories: drought, war, disease, but the evidence is fractured, the timelines uncertain. How could entire societies, some more advanced than we imagined possible, vanish without a trace? Who were these people, really? What secrets did they take with them? From the labyrinthine ruins of the Indus Valley to the windswept silence of the ancestral Puebloans, from the submerged temples off the coast of Japan to the haunting lines etched into Peru's earth, each mystery lingers like a whisper from the past, daring us to listen. Tonight, we journey into the forgotten, into the empires time refused to remember. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the greatest vanishings in human history, civilizations lost, not to war or memory, but to the unknown. The land is quiet now, still. A sun-baked plain stretching across parts of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, where rivers once flowed with untamed power, carving paths through fertile earth. The wind brushes over crumbling walls, long abandoned. Yet in the silence, something lingers. Scattered across this vast, arid land are the ruins of one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. A civilization so old, it predates ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. And yet, it left behind no kings, no tales of conquest, no towering monuments to gods or war. This is the Indus Valley Civilization, or as it is sometimes called, the Harappan Civilization. Its cities, Huarpa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, are feats of quiet brilliance, laid out on precise grids, built with uniform bricks, equipped with sophisticated drainage systems that would not be out of place in a modern suburb. Even their bathrooms, connected to covered sewage channels, suggest an understanding of sanitation far ahead of their time. And yet, for all its achievements, the Indus Valley left behind something else, something far more elusive: silence. No deciphered language, no Rosetta Stone, no royal tombs or epic texts, only symbols scratched into seals and tablets that remain unreadable to this day. Who were these people who built so wisely, yet vanished so completely? Archaeologists believe the Indus civilization flourished between 2600 and 1900 BCE. At its height, it may have housed over 5 million people, thriving in dozens of urban centers across a region larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. But unlike those societies, the Indus left few signs of violence, no evidence of vast armies, no palaces, no temples crowned with offerings. Instead, they left behind uniformity, standardized weights, bricks, and tools, suggesting a culture organized not by power, but by principle. Some scholars have speculated that they may have lived under a system of egalitarian governance, or perhaps a decentralized network of cities without a central ruler. But without written records, we can only guess. Then, around 1900 BCE, it all begins to fade. Cities are gradually abandoned. Trade routes grow quiet. The script disappears from seals. What caused this slow unraveling? The mainstream explanations are grounded in natural change. Some point to climate, shifting monsoons and drying rivers, especially the mysterious disappearance of the once mighty Sarasvati River, may have rendered the region less habitable. Others believe tectonic shifts altered watercourses, turning thriving towns into dry ruins. Still others suggest that soil salinization and overuse of resources may have slowly degraded the agricultural base that sustained these cities. There are no signs of invasion, no great wars, just a soft, collective exhale into oblivion. But not everyone is satisfied with the quiet explanations. Some researchers have noted peculiarities. The undeciphered script, found on thousands of seals and pottery shards, is remarkably consistent, yet it vanishes without evolution. Was it a symbolic system or a full-fledged written language? Why has it resisted all attempts at decoding? Others have pointed out that while Mesopotamia and Egypt were deeply religious, building grand temples and statues to their deities, the Indus cities seem almost secular. Were their gods lost with their language? Or did they follow a belief system so different from ours that we've misread their silence as absence? There are fringe theories too, whispers at the edge of archaeology. Some have suggested that the Indus people may have migrated en masse, not vanished, that they became the roots of later Indian culture, their identity dissolved into oral tradition and rural life. Others propose a lost catastrophe, an epidemic, a comet impact, or even an unknown societal collapse that left little trace. A few venture further still, hinting at forgotten technology or ancient wisdom that has yet to be rediscovered. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, a large public water tank surrounded by colonnades, has invited special interest. Was it used for ritual purification, civic gathering, or something stranger? Its purpose remains speculative, even as it testifies to an advanced knowledge of hydraulics and urban planning. And then there are the skeletons. In parts of Mohenjo-Daro, a number of human remains were found lying in the streets, unburied. Some appear to have fallen suddenly, arms outstretched, as if something terrible arrived without warning. For a time, this fed theories of sudden disaster or mass violence. But later, analysis cast doubt. Perhaps these bones came later, their position not as meaningful as once believed. Still, the image persists. A city that lived in harmony with nature and its neighbors, undone not by sword or fire, but by forces we cannot fully see. Today, efforts to decipher the Indus script continue, with advances in computational linguistics and AI rekindling hope. Excavations turn up more clues each year. Pottery etched with mysterious marks, jewelry of carnelian and gold, clay figurines, perhaps of mother goddesses or fertility spirits, or maybe just children's toys. But each answer raises more questions. Why did such an advanced culture leave no written explanation of itself? Why did its urban genius fade so quietly, without the usual signs of conquest or catastrophe? And how much of what they built, how much of what they believed, still lies buried beneath the earth, waiting? Perhaps the Indus Valley's greatest achievement was not just in what it created, but in what it managed to hide. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all is this: if such a great civilization can vanish so completely, could it happen again? And just as the ancient cities of the Indus Valley faded silently into the dust, across an ocean and centuries later, another civilization would rise, then vanish, leaving behind its own monumental traces beneath the soil of a continent most never associate with ancient empires. The Mississippian culture, shadows beneath the mounds. In the flatlands near the banks of the Mississippi River, just east of present-day St. Louis, the earth swells unexpectedly into massive geometric mounds that rise above the surrounding fields like ancient waves frozen in time. They are quiet now, grass-covered, silent. But centuries ago, this was the heart of a thriving city, Cahokia. Once the largest urban center north of Mesoamerica, Cahokia was not a village or an isolated settlement. It was a city, teeming with life, commerce, ceremony, and mystery. At its peak around 1100 CE, Cahokia may have rivaled the population of medieval London. Tens of thousands of people lived here in a dense, carefully organized community stretching across 6 square miles, with more than 100 earthen mounds shaping the skyline. The centerpiece, Monk's Mound, remains the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas. It rises some 10 stories tall, its base larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built not of stone, but of earth, moved basket by human hands over generations. An estimated 22 million cubic feet of soil. But why? For whom? We know little of the people who built it. Their names are lost. Their language is gone. No written records remain. What we do have are clues, subtle, fragmented, and strange. Wood henges, circular arrangements of large wooden posts, suggest that the people of Cahokia observed the solstices, tracked the seasons, and perhaps aligned their ceremonies with the movements of the sun. They cultivated maize and squash. They traded shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes, obsidian from the Rockies. Their influence spread across rivers and forests in all directions, as evidenced by artifacts found in distant regions, carrying the unmistakable aesthetic of Cahokia's elite. But for all its scale and sophistication, Cahokia was not a stone city. It was organic, constructed with wood, thatch, and clay. It was vulnerable to time, to weather, to erasure. Still, archaeology has uncovered enough to glimpse something extraordinary, a culture organized around a powerful elite class. Some mounds likely served as platforms for temples or the homes of rulers. Burial sites contain lavish grave goods, ornaments, tools, and the remains of sacrificial victims. In one such burial, a man was interred atop a bed of shell beads in the shape of a bird, possibly a falcon, surrounded by more than 50 young women, some of whom appear to have been killed. Was this a royal figure? A religious icon? A god king? The answers are sparse. What caused the rise of such a complex society in the heart of North America, so far from the ancient cities of Mesoamerica? Was it trade, religion, agriculture? And more importantly, what caused it to fall? By the 13th century, just 200 years after its height, Cahokia was in decline. The mounds remained, but the people were gone. Theories abound. Some scholars point to environmental degradation. Deforestation, soil exhaustion, and flooding may have destabilized the region's delicate balance. Others blame political unrest, famine, or disease. As the city's population swelled beyond its capacity, internal tensions may have flared. Yet no single cause can fully explain the rapid unraveling of such an elaborate and expansive culture. And then, there are stranger questions. Why did such a significant civilization leave so little trace in the oral traditions of surrounding tribes? Why were no great epics or legends passed down about Cahokia's rulers, priests, or battles? Was the culture assimilated, or did its collapse trigger a cultural silence? Some researchers have speculated about celestial alignments, suggesting that the entire city was constructed in accordance with astronomical events. Others wonder whether Cahokia's mound builders inherited traditions from earlier, now forgotten cultures, civilizations whose own histories lie buried even deeper. Then there are the more fringe ideas, whispers of ancient visitors from faraway lands, or lost races of mound builders wiped from history. Some point to similarities between Cahokia's burial practices and those found in distant corners of the world. But without written records, these theories remain speculative, unprovable, yet persistently fascinating. What we do know is that Cahokia was not an isolated anomaly. It was the apex of the Mississippian culture, which stretched across what is now the southeastern United States. Dozens of other mound sites still dot the landscape, from Etowah in Georgia to Moundville in Alabama, suggesting a vast network of shared beliefs, customs, and power. And yet, for all this, Cahokia remains largely unknown to the broader public. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, its ruins lie in quiet anonymity. Highways pass nearby. Suburbs have crept to its borders, but the mounds still rise, undisturbed, holding secrets in their core. Perhaps that is what makes Cahokia so haunting. It is a story half told, barely remembered. A city of immense purpose, built by hands we cannot name, governed by a vision we do not understand. What was life like at the top of Monk's Mound, gazing out over a city of thousands? What songs did they sing? What rituals did they perform beneath the stars? And why did they leave? Perhaps the answers lie waiting, beneath the earth, in the grain of ancient wood, in the pattern of forgotten artifacts. Or perhaps the mystery of Cahokia is not meant to be solved, but contemplated, a reminder that history is not only written in stone and scrolls, but also in silence and in the soft rise of earth beneath our feet. And just as Cahokia's mounds rise silently from the soil, marking the memory of a civilization nearly forgotten, we journey now even further back in time, into the humid jungles of southern Mexico, where a different mystery lies carved not into earth, but into stone. The Olmecs, faces in the stone. In the thick green lowlands of Veracruz and Tabasco, beneath the canopy of ancient trees and tangled vines, they wait, silent, immense, watching. The Olmec colossal heads, some weighing over 20 tons, emerge from the forest like sentinels of another world. Carved from single basalt boulders, transported across miles of swamp and jungle, each face is unique. Broad noses, full lips, stern, enigmatic expressions. They bear helmets or headdresses, each marked with mysterious glyphs. No one knows exactly who they represent. Were they kings, warriors, gods? The Olmec civilization flourished between 1600 and 400 BCE, long before the Maya and Aztecs would dominate the Mesoamerican world. And yet, despite their age, the Olmecs displayed an astonishing level of complexity. Their influence can be traced in art, religion, and architecture across later cultures, echoes of a forgotten origin story. They are often called the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. But perhaps mother is too gentle a word. The Olmecs did not simply plant seeds, they sculpted the very foundation. And then, they vanished. At the site of San Lorenzo, one of the earliest known Olmec centers, raised platforms and drainage systems suggest advanced urban planning. But it's the monuments that capture the imagination. Massive stone altars, thrones, and heads, arranged with precise care. Nearby, the site of La Venta rises along a river, with its Great Pyramid, an earthen structure over 100 feet tall, once aligned with celestial events. How did a civilization over 3,000 years ago possess such knowledge? How did they move and shape stones of such size without wheels or metal tools? And perhaps most intriguingly, where did they go? Mainstream archaeology offers some answers. The Olmec heartland, fertile yet unstable, was prone to flooding and volcanic activity. Environmental change may have disrupted agriculture, forcing populations to abandon key centers. Political upheaval, rival factions, religious shifts may have fractured their control. And yet, even as the cities crumbled, the Olmec worldview seemed to endure, spreading like a current through time. Their art is distinctive: human jaguar hybrids, infantile figures with almond-shaped eyes, and serpents twined with symbols. Many of these forms appear later in Maya and Aztec mythology. The Olmecs may have been the first in the region to ritualize bloodletting, human sacrifice, and sacred ball games, traditions carried forward for centuries. But for all we've uncovered, the core of Olmec identity remains in shadow. We do not know what they called themselves. Olmec is a Nahuatl word, meaning people of the rubber country, applied long after their time. We do not know their language, though some scholars suggest it may have links to Mixozoquian tongues, and we cannot read their earliest glyphs, inscriptions that some believe may represent one of the first true writing systems in the Americas. At the site of Cascajal, a small slab of stone bears a series of engraved symbols, not pictures, but structured patterns. If it is indeed a script, it predates Maya writing by several centuries. But without a Rosetta Stone of its own, its message is lost. And then, there are the anomalies. Some researchers point to the colossal heads themselves. Their features, broad noses, prominent lips, have prompted speculation. Were they stylized depictions of local rulers? Or do they hint at distant, unknown connections? Some fringe theorists have drawn comparisons to African sculptures, suggesting ancient transoceanic contact. But no conclusive evidence supports this idea, and mainstream scholars caution against reading too much into facial traits shaped by artistic convention and regional identity. Still, the questions linger. How did the Olmecs achieve such technological feats with the tools available to them? How did they organize labor on such a vast scale, moving tons of basalt over treacherous terrain? And why do so many of their symbols, serpents, jaguars, pyramids aligned to the heavens, mirror those of distant, unconnected cultures? Another mystery lies in their sudden disappearance. By around 400 BCE, the great Olmec cities are abandoned, their monuments left behind, their leaders forgotten. Some suggest internal collapse, a weakening of the ruling elite combined with environmental pressures. Others wonder if the Olmecs never truly vanished, but simply transformed, dispersing into smaller groups that seeded future cultures with their beliefs. And then, there are the artifacts, objects found far beyond the Olmec heartland. Jade masks in distant valleys, ceremonial axes shaped with uncanny precision. Their art seems to travel without an army, their ideas without an empire. Was this diffusion, or something more deliberate? Perhaps the most haunting mystery is not what the Olmecs left behind, but what they chose not to preserve. We find no royal tombs, no written chronicles, no self-glorifying monuments. Only stone faces staring out across time with unreadable expressions, as if they knew their words would fade, but hoped their silence might endure. Even now, as the jungle reclaims their cities and the rivers shift their banks, the Olmecs remain a question half-asked. Who were they, truly? What did they see in the stars? What songs did they sing as they carved their gods from stone? And what other secrets lie buried beneath the trees, waiting, not to be revealed, but to be understood? In the echoes of the Olmecs, we hear a truth echoed across civilizations, that greatness does not guarantee remembrance, and that the earth still holds the stories of those who walked before us, if we know where and how to look. And as the enigmatic faces of the Olmecs continue to gaze silently through time across the deserts of the ancient world, another mystery waits, etched not into wood or clay, but carved directly into stone, beneath a scorching sun and beneath centuries of sand. The Nabataeans, echoes of stone in the desert. In the heart of the Jordanian desert, surrounded by red cliffs and wind-swept canyons, an impossible sight appears. As the sun shifts across the sandstone walls, the facade of Al-Khazna, the treasury, emerges from the shadows. Towering columns, intricate friezes, and sculpted guardians stare out from the rock, not built upon it, but carved directly into it. This is Petra, once hidden, now iconic. And at its center lies a civilization as mysterious as the stones they left behind, the Nabataeans. They were traders, builders, and engineers, masters of water and silence. For centuries, the Nabataeans thrived in one of the most unforgiving climates on Earth, And then, they vanished. But how? The earliest traces of the Nabataeans emerge in the 4th century BCE, when they were described as nomads, tribes who moved through the desert, herding animals and living in tents. But over time, they did something unusual for a nomadic people. They built. By the 1st century BCE, Petra had become a flourishing city, its architecture a breathtaking blend of Hellenistic grace and Eastern symbolism. Towering temples, tombs, and monumental gateways rose from desert stone, each structure seamlessly integrated into the natural landscape. And yet, this city was more than a marvel of aesthetics. It was a masterpiece of survival. The Nabataeans engineered complex water systems, hidden channels, dams, and underground cisterns, allowing them to store and distribute precious water across their settlements. They flourished not by conquering, but by connecting. Their cities lay along major trade routes, linking Arabia with the Mediterranean, and moving spices, incense, textiles, and gold across empires. And yet, for all their ingenuity, for all their influence, the Nabataeans left no libraries, no epic inscriptions, no grand narratives explaining who they were or what they believed. Only scattered clues, left in stone and silence. Their script, Nabataean Aramaic, evolved over time and eventually gave rise to Arabic script, but many of their texts are short, practical, and cryptic. They do not reveal a detailed history or a record of their leaders. Even Petra, for all its majesty, holds few firm answers. Who ruled this civilization? What gods did they worship? What secrets lay behind the stone walls and towering facades? Mainstream historians suggest that Petra's rise was rooted in economic power. By controlling trade routes and managing scarce resources, the Nabataeans built wealth and stability. Their alliances with larger empires, first the Seleucids, then the Romans, allowed them to maintain autonomy for centuries. But by 106 CE, the Roman Empire annexed Nabataea. The last known Nabataean king, Rabel II, disappears from records shortly before that time. Within a few generations, the distinct Nabataean culture had faded, absorbed into the Roman world, or so it seems. Why did such an advanced and prosperous culture leave so little behind in terms of legacy? Why do their temples lack inscriptions? Why did they not resist Roman annexation more forcefully, or at least record it? And how did a people who left so little written record develop such advanced knowledge of hydraulics, astronomy, and architecture? Some scholars point to the mysterious purpose of Petra itself. Al-Khazne, the treasury, is not a treasury at all, but likely a tomb. Yet no remains have ever been found inside. Other structures in Petra also appear to be ceremonial or funerary, but their exact function remains speculative. Was Petra primarily a necropolis, a spiritual center, a ceremonial city visited only for special rites? Others suggest that much of the city remains buried, hidden beneath centuries of sediment, waiting to be unearthed. Only a fraction of Petra has been fully excavated. What might still lie beneath its dust-covered courtyards? And then, there are more speculative ideas. Some theorists propose that the Nabataeans possessed esoteric knowledge, perhaps astronomical or symbolic, that guided their city's construction. Alignments with solstices and equinoxes have been noted in some structures, leading to theories that Petra functioned as a giant calendar or cosmic temple. Others, pointing to the sudden sophistication of their architecture, wonder if the Nabataeans inherited knowledge from an even older culture, now lost to time. A few fringe theories even suggest contact with ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, or civilizations farther afield, though no conclusive evidence supports these claims. Still, Petra itself resists easy explanation. How did a nomadic people transition so swiftly into monumental builders? Why did they invest so much energy in carving into solid rock, an undertaking far more difficult than building above ground? And what happened to their identity after the Roman annexation? Did they assimilate willingly, or did something else drive them into obscurity? Even now, as tourists pass through the sea, the narrow gorge leading to Petra, they walk the same path Nabataean priests and travelers once took. The air is dry, the rock walls high and close, and then suddenly the treasury appears, unfolding in golden light, timeless and still. But behind that beauty lies a silence, not the silence of ruin, but of restraint. The Nabataeans did not tell us who they were. They left no manifestos, no origin stories, no final words, only temples without names, tombs without bodies, and structures that suggest a depth of thought we have only begun to glimpse. Perhaps the Nabataeans understood something we have forgotten, that permanence is not found in stories told, but in mysteries left behind. And so we are left to wonder, were they simply absorbed into history, or did their greatest secrets remain hidden, carved into the mountains, waiting for the right eyes to see them? And as Petra's rose-colored walls whisper secrets of a people who vanished into the folds of empire, we journey now to the highlands of Anatolia, where stone gates guard the memories of another lost power, a civilization whose very existence was once doubted, until the earth revealed the truth. The Hittite Empire, forgotten kings of stone and silence. In the hills of central Turkey, near the modern town of Boğazkale, the wind moves across an ancient plain. Scattered among the grass are stones, some tumbled, some still standing. But step closer, and a different picture begins to emerge. Vast walls, cyclopean in scale, once enclosed a city. Carved lions and sphinxes once stood watch over mighty gates. This was Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire. At first glance, the site is quiet, but beneath that stillness lies the legacy of a power that once challenged Egypt, forged treaties with Babylon, and ruled over much of the ancient Near East. A people long forgotten, and rediscovered only in the last 2 centuries. For much of recorded history, the Hittites were a mystery mentioned only in the Bible, their name appearing alongside great ancient peoples. But until the 19th century, no trace of them had ever been found. Scholars believed they were myth, a footnote, perhaps a mistranslation. That changed in 1834, when French explorer Charles Texier stumbled upon the ruins of Hattusa. Massive stone fortifications and monumental gates hinted at an empire lost in time. But it wasn't until the early 20th century that archaeologists began to uncover clay tablets, thousands of them, written in cuneiform, in a language that had never been seen before. The Hittites were real, and they had once stood among the greatest powers of the ancient world. By the 14th century BCE, the Hittite Empire stretched across much of Anatolia and northern Syria. They fought the Egyptians at Kadesh in what is considered the largest chariot battle in history. They forged the world's oldest known peace treaty, a document so influential, a replica now hangs in the United Nations building in New York. Their laws were advanced, even by modern standards, their society complex, their political alliances far-reaching. And yet, despite all this, the Hittites left behind no enduring cultural legacy, no continuous tradition, no unbroken language. When they fell, they did not fade, they disappeared. What happened? Mainstream archaeology tells a familiar story. Around 1200 BCE, the Hittite Empire collapsed, along with many other Bronze Age civilizations. This was the time of the so-called Bronze Age collapse, a mysterious wave of destruction that swept across the eastern Mediterranean. Great cities were abandoned or burned, trade networks disintegrated, writing systems vanished. Some scholars blame natural disasters, droughts, earthquakes, or disease. Others point to internal strife, invasions by the enigmatic sea peoples, or the breakdown of centralized power. The Hittites, already facing pressure from rival states and restive provinces, may have simply fractured. But Hattusa was not destroyed in a great battle. It was burned, systematically, its archives, temples, and palaces consumed in fire. Who set the flames? Rebels? Invaders? The Hittites themselves? And why did such a powerful empire leave so little trace in the centuries that followed? After the fall, the Hittite lands splintered into smaller Neo-Hittite kingdoms, scattered across Syria and southeastern Anatolia. But these too eventually vanished. Their language, Hittite, the oldest known Indo-European tongue, was lost for millennia, only deciphered in the 20th century. And even now, with thousands of tablets recovered from Hattusa and other sites, many mysteries remain. Their religion, a complex blend of Hattic, Hurrian, and Mesopotamian deities, featured storm gods and sun goddesses, sacred bulls, and cosmic dragons. Their ceremonies were elaborate, involving oracles, animal sacrifices, and divination. But no great temples remain standing. No clear iconography survives to rival Egypt or Mesopotamia. The Hittites seem to absorb other cultures rather than impose their own. Their art is understated, their monuments buried, their legacy ephemeral. And this raises deeper questions. Why did such a powerful empire leave behind so little that endured? Was this by design or by fate? Some scholars suggest the Hittites lacked the cultural cohesion of Egypt or the religious fervor of Mesopotamia. Others believe they may have relied too heavily on an elite bureaucracy, disconnected from the population it governed. Still others wonder whether we've simply not looked in the right places, that the Anatolian soil still hides palaces, archives, and shrines yet untouched. More speculative theories go further. Some note curious linguistic and cultural connections between the Hittites and distant Indo-European peoples. Could the Hittites have been part of an even older migration, one whose origins stretch back to the mythic Indo-European homeland? Others point to the precision of their astronomical knowledge or the architectural alignments of their temples and wonder whether they possessed cosmological insights now forgotten. Still others look to their myths, tales of divine conflict, cyclical destruction, and rebirth, and suggest they may hint at real catastrophes. Did the Hittites record, in allegory, the very disasters that undid them? At Yazilikaya, a sanctuary near Hattusa, stone reliefs depict long processions of gods and goddesses carved into rock walls beneath the open sky. Some scholars now believe this site may represent an astronomical calendar, aligned to lunar and solar cycles. If true, it suggests that the Hittites encoded time itself into stone. But why? What knowledge were they preserving? What warnings or wisdom did they hope to pass down? In the silence of Hattusa's ruins, there are no answers, only wind through broken gates and the faint impression of an empire that ruled in strength and vanished in silence. The Hittites were once counted among the great powers of the ancient world. Today, they are a shadow, a name recovered from fire and stone, a reminder that history does not only forget the weak. So we are left to wonder, what other empires lie hidden beneath our feet, unknown, waiting, and watching, as time moves quietly on. And as the echoes of the Hittite Empire fade into the Anatolian hills, we drift southward, across the Aegean Sea, to an island where another ancient power once flourished. A people surrounded not by stone walls or desert sands, but by waves and myths. A civilization so advanced and yet so elusive that even today its story reads like a legend. The Minoans, secrets beneath the waves. Beneath the blue skies of Crete, where olive trees sway in the salty breeze and mountains roll down to meet the sea, The ruins of Knossos emerge like a memory. Stone staircases climb to nowhere. Crimson columns rise from sun-bleached courtyards. Faded frescoes still dance with life. Bulls leaping through air, goddesses in flowing robes, dolphins gliding through watery murals. This was the heart of the Minoan civilization. Elegant, mysterious, forgotten. Long before Athens, before Rome, before even the myths of Homer, the Minoans ruled these islands. From approximately 2000 to 1450 BCE, they built a maritime empire that extended across the Aegean and beyond. Their ships carried goods and ideas from Egypt to the Levant. Their palaces were complex, multi-storied, and filled with light. Their art, sensual, naturalistic, vibrant, feels almost modern. And yet, we know almost nothing about them. We don't know what they called themselves. The name Minoan was given by the modern archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans after the mythic king Minos. We don't know the structure of their government, their religion, or the true meaning of their writing. We don't even know for sure how or why they disappeared. But the clues they left behind are captivating. Knossos is the most famous of their sites, but it was not alone. Phaistos, Malea, Zakros, each palace unique, yet sharing a common style. Central courtyards, storerooms, ceremonial spaces. No defensive walls, no signs of a warrior class. A civilization seemingly built on trade, art, and ritual rather than conquest. Their writing, Linear A, remains undeciphered. Hundreds of tablets inscribed with symbols sit in museums and storerooms, silently resisting translation. The language it encodes is unknown, unrelated to any that survived in later Greek history. Its meaning remains one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. And then there is the myth, the tale of the labyrinth, of the Minotaur, of Daedalus and Icarus. These stories, passed down through Greek legend, all point back to Crete, back to Knossos. Could they be distant echoes of Minoan culture, distorted through time? Was the palace itself the labyrinth, its twisting corridors and layered chambers giving rise to tales of monsters and mazes? Or were the myths born to explain something more cataclysmic? Around 1450 BCE, Minoan civilization began to collapse. Palaces were abandoned or burned. Trade routes vanished. The people, once dominant, faded from the record. And at the center of many theories lies a single event, the eruption of Thera. Thera, modern-day Santorini, was once a large, thriving island with its own Minoan settlement, Akrotiri. Around 1600 BCE, it erupted in one of the largest volcanic events in human history. The island's center was obliterated, leaving behind a flooded caldera. Ash darkened the skies as far away as Egypt. Tidal waves may have swept across the Aegean, devastating coastal cities. The shockwaves of this eruption, literal and cultural, could have shattered the Minoan world. But the dates do not align perfectly. Some archaeologists argue that the eruption happened a century before the Minoan collapse. Others suggest it triggered a slow unraveling, destroying fleets, weakening economies, shaking religious confidence. Could Thera have been the inspiration for Plato's Atlantis? A wealthy, peaceful society lost beneath the waves. The parallels are tempting, but they remain speculation. More grounded theories suggest that, in the wake of natural disaster, the Minoans may have been invaded or culturally absorbed by the Mycenaeans, the rising Greek-speaking civilization on the mainland. Mycenaean influence becomes visible in later Cretan sites. Their script, Linear B, deciphered and known to be an early form of Greek, appears where Linear A disappears. Did the Mycenaeans conquer Crete outright? Or did they move into a power vacuum, occupying a broken and leaderless land? We don't know. The record is too sparse, the ruins too silent. And yet, the art remains. The frescoes still breathe. In one, a bare-chested woman with long flowing hair gazes serenely into the distance, her eyes alive with something we can't quite name. In another, young men and women somersault over charging bulls, a ritual called Taurokathapsia, captured in motion with a grace that defies time. What kind of people painted these walls? What did they believe? Did they worship a mother goddess, as Evans once proposed? Did their rituals echo through generations, or end abruptly, lost in ash and war? Even now, the Mediterranean holds its secrets. Underwater archaeology has uncovered shipwrecks and submerged structures. Earthquakes have reshaped the landscape. Entire settlements may lie buried beneath centuries of silt and sea, and Linear A remains stubbornly unread. Every symbol is a lock, every tablet a whisper. The Minoans were not forgotten because they were unimportant. They were forgotten because their story was interrupted. No survivors wrote their history. No successors carried their name. And so we are left to reconstruct a civilization from broken palaces and faded pigments, from objects buried in time, and questions that echo louder the longer they remain unanswered. What else lies hidden beneath the soil of Crete, beneath the waters of the Aegean? What final chapter, if any, might explain the quiet end of a people who once built palaces of light in an age of stone? The Minoans speak to us not with words, but with images. And in those images, the mystery lives on. And from the sun-drenched palaces of the Minoans, whose frescoes still dance in color, we now turn westward, across oceans, across centuries, to a landscape no less majestic. A place carved by wind and time, where stone cities cling to cliffs, and the silence speaks of a people who once built high above the desert floor. The ancestral Puebloans, vanished architects of the canyon. In the Four Corners region of the American Southwest, where Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona converge, the land is wide and raw. Endless mesas stretch into distant horizons. Red rock canyons plunge into quiet shadow, and tucked into the alcoves of these cliffs are ruins, beautiful, haunting, inexplicably complex. Stone towers, circular ceremonial rooms called kivas, multi-story dwellings with perfectly aligned walls and finely shaped masonry. These are the remnants of the ancestral Puebloans, known to earlier scholars as the Anasazi, a word borrowed from the Navajo language, often translated as ancient enemies or ancient ones. But these people were not enemies. They were astronomers, architects, artists, and farmers. Between 600 and 1300 CE, they built one of the most sophisticated pre-Columbian societies in North America. And then they left. The most iconic of their settlements is Chaco Canyon, a remote valley in northwestern New Mexico. At first glance, it seems desolate, but more than 1,000 years ago, it was a hub of ceremonial life and trade, a place of gathering and mystery. Great houses like Pueblo Bonito rose from the desert, some over 4 stories tall, with hundreds of rooms and precise architectural alignments. Massive timber beams, some weighing hundreds of pounds, were carried over 50 miles from distant mountains. Roads extended outward from Chaco in straight lines, visible even today from the air, and no one is quite sure why. Was Chaco a city? A religious center? A seasonal gathering place? Some archaeologists believe it was all three. Others suggest it was something more symbolic, a constructed landscape meant to mirror the cosmos, a spiritual map etched into the earth. The people who built these structures were not a single tribe, but a cultural network spread across the Southwest. From Mesa Verde to Hovenweep, from Canyon de Chelly to Bandelier, their settlements followed common patterns: cliff dwellings, pit houses, astronomical markers. They farmed maize in arid soils, stored food in ceramic vessels, and traded turquoise, shells, and pottery across vast distances. They studied the sky. At Fajada Butte in Chaco Canyon, a spiral petroglyph aligns with beams of sunlight during solstices and equinoxes, marking the passage of time. How much did they know about the stars above them? How did they translate celestial patterns into architecture, into ceremony? And then, by the late 13th century, the great cities were empty. Rooms were abandoned, tools left behind, fires extinguished. Why? Mainstream theories point to environmental stress. Tree ring data shows decades-long droughts in the 12th and 13th centuries, an unforgiving time for an agrarian society in a desert climate. As water grew scarce, crops failed. Hunger may have driven migration or conflict. There's evidence of social fragmentation, too. Some sites show signs of violence, defensive structures, burned dwellings, human remains with trauma. Others seem to have been abandoned peacefully, slowly, as if their inhabitants simply moved on. Some scholars propose spiritual reasons, that the structures, once sacred, had fulfilled their purpose, that rituals demanded departure, that cultural beliefs, invisible to us, shaped their decision to leave behind the monumental in favor of the mobile. And then there are the more speculative ideas. Some point to the straight roads radiating from Chaco Canyon, many of which do not follow terrain or connect obvious destinations. Were they ceremonial pathways, lines of pilgrimage, astronomical markers? Others note the architectural alignments between great houses and celestial events. The moon's 18.6-year cycle, complex even by modern standards, appears to be reflected in the construction of certain structures. Could the ancestral Puebloans have had an advanced astronomical system lost to time? More fringe theories suggest ancient contact with distant peoples, even with non-human intelligences, ideas rooted more in imagination than evidence, yet persistent in popular culture. But perhaps the deeper mystery lies not in what happened to the ancestral Puebloans, but in how a civilization so connected to the land, so attuned to sky and stone, could vanish so completely, and yet leave so few stories behind. They did not disappear without descendants. Today's Hopi, Zuni, and many Pueblo tribes trace their lineage to these ancient builders. Their oral traditions speak of migrations, of emergence, of sacred places and ancestral homes. But those stories, rich in symbolism and sacred meaning, are not always offered to outsiders. They remain protected, as they should be. Still, from the stones of Chaco to the ledges of Mesa Verde, the questions linger. Who decided to build so high into the cliffs? Why were some rooms sealed and others left open? What were the songs sung in the kivas, deep beneath the ground? And what knowledge did these people carry with them when they left? Perhaps it was not a collapse, but a transformation. Perhaps the ancestral Puebloans did not vanish, but changed shape, becoming something quieter, more mobile, less bound to stone. Or perhaps there are still stories waiting, buried beneath layers of dust and time. Not lost, but waiting, for someone who remembers how to listen. In these canyons, where the wind still moves through doorways and shadows shift across ancient walls, the past is not gone. It is resting, watching, and asking, what else have we yet to understand? And as the echoes of the ancestral Puebloans drift through the canyon winds, fading but never truly silent, we now turn our gaze to the rolling hills of Eastern Europe, to a forgotten chapter of prehistory, buried beneath farmlands and forests, where strange patterns etched in clay whisper of a people both advanced and unknown, a culture that rose long before the pyramids, and then vanished, leaving behind only spirals, ruins, and silence. The Cucuteni-Trypillia Culture, spirals in the earth. In the soft light of dawn, the plains of modern-day Ukraine, Moldova and Romania seem quiet, a patchwork of green fields, low hills, and distant trees. But buried beneath this landscape are the traces of one of Europe's oldest and most mysterious civilizations, the Cucuteni-Trypillia culture. A society so ancient, it predates Stonehenge and the Great Wall. So vast, it built some of the largest settlements in Neolithic Europe. And yet, until relatively recently, it was almost entirely unknown. Their story begins over 7,000 years ago, around 4,800 BCE, and stretches forward for nearly 2 millennia. They built settlements, some as large as 15,000 inhabitants, astonishing in an age when most of humanity lived in scattered hamlets or isolated farming communities. Their homes were made of wood and clay, arranged in concentric circles or spirals. Streets were planned, structures aligned, order was evident. And then, just as mysteriously as they appeared, they were gone. The first evidence of the Cucuteni-Trypillia people came to light in the late 19th century when archaeologists uncovered fragments of pottery adorned with intricate, swirling patterns, geometric spirals, meanders, and stylized human and animal forms. The designs were bold and deliberate, hinting at symbolic systems, at rituals now lost. Thousands of figurines have also been found, often female, often exaggerated in form. Fertility idols, goddesses, ancestors? We don't know. Their language, if they had one, left no written record. And yet, from what remains, it's clear these people were not primitive. They practiced advanced agriculture, rotating crops and managing livestock. Their pottery was fired in kilns at high temperatures. Their tools, crafted from stone, bone, and later copper, show precision and refinement. They lived not in caves or tents, but in permanent structures, sometimes 2 stories tall. They decorated their homes. They buried their dead. They had culture, art, and systems. Some of their cities spanned hundreds of acres. For centuries, they built new homes over old ones, layering the past beneath their feet. And then, in a gesture still not fully understood, they burned them, intentionally. Time and again, entire settlements were set ablaze, ritually, methodically, not in war or violence, but seemingly as part of a cycle. Archaeological layers show this clearly. Whole communities burned, then rebuilt in the same place, over and over. Why? Some believe the burning was symbolic, a cleansing ritual tied to their spiritual beliefs or the changing of generations. Others suggest more practical explanations: pest control, structural decay, or renewal through fire. But none of these fully account for the sheer consistency of the pattern. What kind of worldview sees destruction as a necessary act of creation? Mainstream scholars propose that the Cucuteni-Trypillia were part of the broader Neolithic expansion across Europe, and their decline around 3000 BCE may have been triggered by climate change, soil depletion, or pressure from nomadic cultures migrating from the east, perhaps the early Indo-Europeans. These steppe cultures, more mobile and militarized, may have disrupted the settled life of the Trypillians. But no evidence of a great war has been found, no signs of mass graves or battlefield trauma. The collapse seems more gradual, a fading, not a fall. Some have speculated that social complexity reached a breaking point, that the cities grew too large, the systems too fragile. Others argue that their egalitarian society, showing little evidence of class divisions or central leadership, may have struggled to scale as populations grew. And then there are the fringe ideas. The spirals on their pottery, elegant, mathematical, have drawn comparisons to ancient symbols found across disparate cultures. Some see links to early Indo-European iconography. Others suggest symbolic language systems, long forgotten. A few even entertain theories of lost knowledge, of ancient migrations, or forgotten connections between distant peoples, though such ideas remain unproven. The female figurines have also stirred debate. Were they goddesses in a matriarchal society? Fertility icons in a world where the earth itself was sacred? Or were they more complex, representations of identity, of ancestors, of myth? Without text, we are left with forms, and forms can be interpreted many ways. Still, the mystery endures not because the Cucuteni-Trypillia left no trace, but because what they left challenges our assumptions. That cities, planning, and symbolic art must come later. That civilization moves in a straight line. That war and hierarchy are necessary for scale. This culture defies that narrative. They built large, peaceful settlements with no fortifications. They developed rich art with no record of kings. They lasted for millennia. And then they disappeared, leaving behind only ash, clay, and a quiet kind of brilliance. Was their downfall inevitable or accidental? Was their culture absorbed into others, their ideas carried forward in unseen ways? Or does their legacy lie entirely beneath the ground, waiting to be unearthed piece by piece? Across the Ukrainian and Romanian plains, new discoveries are still being made. Satellite imagery has revealed ancient settlement outlines invisible from the ground. Pottery shards and figurines continue to surface. The story is incomplete, but far from over. And so we ask again, who were the people who shaped spirals in clay before history had a name? And what else might be sleeping beneath the soil, unseen, undecoded, and still watching us from the deep past? And as the spiraling patterns of the Cucuteni-Trypillia dissolve into the soil of forgotten fields, we now follow the heat and the green into the dense, humming jungles of Mesoamerica, a place where towering stone temples rise above the canopy like silent sentinels, and where time was once measured in cycles, carved deep into rock. Here, among roots and ruins, the ancient Maya still whisper through the leaves. The Maya civilization, silence in the southern lowlands. In the heart of the Yucatan Peninsula, time seems to bend. Sunlight filters through a tangle of vines and towering ceiba trees. The air is heavy with moisture, alive with the call of howler monkeys and the flutter of unseen wings. And there, deep within the jungle, half consumed by nature, stone cities emerge. Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, Palenque. Once centers of culture, ceremony, and power, now crumbling, overgrown, and silent. This was the southern lowlands of the Maya world, a place where kings ruled over thousands, where astronomers tracked Venus with unerring precision, and where scribes etched complex glyphs onto stelae, staircases, and codices. For over 1,000 years, between 250 and 900 CE, this region was the cultural and intellectual heart of a civilization that rivaled any in the ancient world. And then, almost inexplicably, it collapsed. What happened here? To walk through a Maya city is to step into an enigma. Monumental pyramids rise in careful alignment with celestial events. The temple of the inscriptions at Palenque. The twin pyramid complexes of Tikal. The vast network of causeways, or sakbiab, connecting cities across miles of unforgiving terrain. All of it built without the wheel, without beasts of burden, without metal tools. And yet, with astonishing mathematical precision, their calendar was more accurate than the Julian. Their writing system, the most sophisticated in the pre-Columbian Americas, is only recently being fully understood. They mapped the heavens, they predicted eclipses, they built entire cities in harmony with the cosmos. But these were not merely scholars in the jungle. The Maya were warriors, theologians, artists, and engineers. Their society was organized into kingdoms, each ruled by a divine Kuhul Ajau, a holy lord, whose lineage was etched into stone and myth. Blood rituals and human sacrifice played a vital role in their religious life, seen not as cruelty, but as sacred duty, feeding the gods, maintaining cosmic balance. And yet, by the end of the 9th century, the great cities of the southern lowlands were abandoned. Tikal fell quiet, Kopan stelae ceased, construction stopped, the forest returned. Why? Mainstream explanations point to a complex storm of factors. Environmental degradation, deforestation to fuel lime kilns and feed growing populations may have stripped the land of its fertility. Climate data from lake cores and cave formations suggest a series of prolonged droughts, devastating for an agricultural society dependent on rainfall and fragile reservoirs. Coupled with this, internal conflict and political instability seem evident. Maya cities were not a unified empire, but competitive kingdoms locked in cycles of alliance and warfare. Inscriptions speak of battles, captives, and shifting power. As drought stressed the land, competition may have turned to collapse. Still, no single explanation suffices. Some cities fell swiftly, others declined slowly over generations. Some Maya populations persisted in the highlands and northern lowlands long after the southern cities were lost. The civilization did not end, but it changed, transformed, scattered. And yet, the great mystery remains. Why abandon such magnificent centers of power and knowledge? Archaeological evidence shows many cities were not destroyed in war. Temples were not burned. In many places, monuments were deliberately buried or carefully closed, sealed as if with reverence. Did the people leave willingly? Were they fulfilling prophecy or responding to visions, omens, or divine instructions? Was this collapse not a failure, but a choice? The mystery deepens when we consider what was left behind. Inscriptions abruptly cease. Artistic expression wanes. Cities are not rebuilt elsewhere. They are simply left to the forest. And for centuries, their story was forgotten. Some speculative theories have flourished in the void. A few have proposed astronomical triggers, a rogue comet or solar event, some cosmic warning misread or misinterpreted. Others suggest a massive outbreak of disease or even mass migration toward undiscovered regions. More fringe theories speak of ancient cataclysms, esoteric knowledge, even extraterrestrial contact, ideas that captivate but remain unsupported by evidence. Yet even without such speculation, the mystery endures. Why did such a capable civilization, so advanced in science, architecture, and governance, fail to adapt, to endure in its heartland? How could a culture that understood time so profoundly run out of it? The forest has hidden much. For centuries, the ruins lay buried, misunderstood by outsiders, often dismissed as empty relics of vanished tribes. But the Maya never disappeared. Their descendants live on, in Guatemala, in Chiapas, in the Yucatan. Their languages are spoken, their traditions endure, and their memory, once ignored, is rising again. Today, LIDAR technology is revealing previously unknown cities beneath the trees, entire urban landscapes stretching for miles, reservoir systems, terraced fields, dense population centers. The more we uncover, the more the old image of jungle-dwelling mystics falls away. What remains is something far more compelling, a civilization deeply in tune with its world, capable of enormous beauty, extraordinary complexity, and decisions we still don't fully understand. Was the collapse of the southern lowlands a failure of leadership, of environment, of belief? Or was it the consequence of forces we cannot yet see, buried as surely as the cities themselves? In the echo of Maya temples, beneath the vines and stones, one can still feel the weight of unanswered questions. The glyphs speak, but incompletely. The forest conceals, but does not erase. And so we are left to wonder, what knowledge did the Maya carry with them when they walked away? And what might still lie hidden in the dark heart of the jungle, waiting for time to reveal it? And as the overgrown temples of the Maya whisper their secrets through jungle leaves, we now turn our gaze far into the Pacific, beyond the mainland, beyond the edges of maps once marked unknown, to a solitary island adrift in blue, where stone faces stare eternally at the sky and sea, a place whose very name has become a riddle. Rapa Nui, the enigma of Easter Island. In the heart of the South Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continental shore, lies a windswept island only 14 miles long. It rises from the waves like a forgotten thought, rugged, volcanic, strangely empty. But its silence is interrupted by presence, hundreds of them. Stone figures, called moai, dot the island's hillsides and coastlines. Towering and stoic, some stand over 30 feet tall and weigh more than 80 tons. They face inland, backs to the sea, as though watching over a people who are no longer there. This is Rapa Nui, known to outsiders as Easter Island, named by a Dutch explorer who stumbled upon it on Easter Sunday in 1722. What he found astonished him, not only because the island was so remote, but because it was filled with these massive statues, and barely anyone to care for them. Who carved these figures? How were they moved across the island's treacherous terrain without wheels or draft animals? And why did the society that built them collapse? Mainstream archaeology traces the origins of Rapa Nui's first settlers to Polynesian voyagers, who arrived around 800 to 1200 CE, navigating thousands of miles of open ocean, using nothing but stars, swells, and seabirds. They brought with them tools, agriculture, and an oral tradition that remembered not just places, but generations. On this isolated speck of land, they built a unique and complex society. They cultivated sweet potatoes, raised chickens, and constructed intricate ceremonial platforms known as ahu. Over time, the moai became central to their culture, monuments to ancestors, repositories of mana, or spiritual energy. Each moai likely represented a revered chief or elder, their eyes once inlaid with coral and obsidian, their presence believed to watch over the land and its people. But the mystery is not simply that the moai exist. It is how they came to be where they stand. Many were carved from volcanic tuff at Rano Raraku, a quarry that still holds nearly 400 partially completed statues, some half-buried, others abandoned mid-creation. From there, the statues were transported, some over 10 miles, to ceremonial sites all over the island. The terrain is steep, uneven, and treacherous. How were these monoliths moved? Mainstream theories suggest a combination of log rollers, ropes, and manpower. Some propose that the statues were walked upright in a rocking motion, using ropes and careful coordination, a feat demonstrated in modern experiments. But the method remains debated. No definitive evidence confirms exactly how they were transported. No written records remain. As the moai grew in size and number, so too did the demands placed on the island's fragile ecosystem. Palm forests were cleared for agriculture, for firewood, and possibly to transport statues. Over time, the island's resources dwindled. Soil eroded, crops failed, the lush forests vanished. By the time European explorers arrived, the society that had once raised the moai was a shadow of its former self. The statues had toppled or been pushed over. The population had plummeted, and the people lived in caves, fractured by clan rivalries, caught in cycles of conflict and survival. This has led to the widely accepted theory of ecological collapse, popularized by scholars like Jared Diamond. According to this view, the Rapa Nui people overexploited their limited resources, leading to deforestation, famine, warfare, and ultimately, societal collapse. A cautionary tale writ large in stone, but others push back. Recent research challenges the idea of a self-inflicted apocalypse. New studies suggest the Polynesian rat, introduced by settlers, may have played a major role in the island's deforestation, gnawing on tree seedlings and preventing regrowth. Some archaeologists argue that Rapa Nui's inhabitants adapted better than once thought, shifting from crops to coastal foraging, creating rock gardens to preserve moisture, and maintaining cultural traditions through hardship. If not collapse, then transformation? The Moai themselves seem to reflect this shift. Many were abandoned in the quarry. Others were deliberately buried or knocked down. What does this mean? A loss of faith in the ancestors? A political upheaval? Or was it the result of outside contact, disease, slavery, or disruption introduced by European arrival? Between the 18th and 19th centuries, foreign contact devastated the island. Slave raids decimated the population. Missionaries erased cultural practices. Oral histories were interrupted. By the late 1800s, only a few hundred Rapa Nui remained, and much of their past had been severed. But the mysteries linger. What was the original purpose of the Moai? Were they truly religious, or did they serve a political function, unifying clans, marking territory, preserving status? Why do so many lie half-finished at the quarry? Were they abandoned suddenly, or left behind by choice? And then there is the question of Rongorongo, a mysterious script found on wooden tablets discovered in the 19th century. The only known example of pre-contact Polynesian writing, it has yet to be definitively deciphered. Some scholars believe it may be a mnemonic device, not a true script. Others believe it encodes genealogies, rituals, or historical records, possibly even the story of the Moai and the fall of their creators. But with so few tablets remaining and so much lost, the language remains silent. Rapa Nui is more than an island. It is a paradox, a place where ingenuity met isolation, where monumentality emerged from scarcity, where memory was carved into stone and then buried by time. Today, the Moai stand again, some restored, others left as they fell. But they remain as they always were, watchful, inscrutable, profoundly human. And as the ocean swirls endlessly around their island, we are left to wonder, what were they trying to preserve? What were they trying to say? And what stories still lie buried beneath the volcanic soil of Rapa Nui, waiting to be remembered? And as the stone giants of Rapa Nui continue their silent vigil, far from any shore, we return to the cradle of Western memory, to a land whose legends shaped the roots of epic poetry and ancient war, a place where lions guard ancient gates and golden masks once lay over the faces of forgotten kings. Here, myth and history blur beneath the sun-bleached ruins of Mycenae. The Mycenaeans, lords of the Bronze Age. Twilight. In the northeastern Peloponnese of Greece, atop a rocky hill encircled by mountains, the ruins of Mycenae rise from the earth like bones of an ancient beast. Massive limestone walls, known to later Greeks as Cyclopean, enclose a citadel once brimming with life, ambition, and wealth. At its entrance, two lions carved in relief flank a triangular slab, the iconic Lion Gate, watching over the threshold of one of Europe's first great civilizations. This was the seat of the Mycenaeans, warriors, architects, and rulers of the Greek world during the late Bronze Age, from roughly 1600 to 1100 BCE. They were the people behind the legends, the shadowy figures behind the stories of Agamemnon, of Troy, of Homer's Iliad. For centuries, their memory was kept alive only in myth, until archaeology began to uncover the reality beneath the poetry. And yet, like the myths themselves, the truth is fragmentary. elusive, wrapped in glory and collapse. The Mycenaeans left behind a network of palatial centers, Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, each dominated by a central megaron, or great hall, where kings held court. These palaces were administrative hubs, religious centers, and symbols of power. Linear B tablets, inscribed with an early form of Greek, reveal lists, inventories, rituals. Their world was organized, stratified, and tightly controlled. They traded as far as Egypt and the Levant. Their pottery has been found in Cyprus, Sicily, and beyond. They absorbed and adapted ideas from the older Minoan civilization, adopting its iconography, script, and artistic styles, but replacing its emphasis on nature and ritual with images of warfare, chariotry, and conquest. Their tombs, like the beehive-shaped tholos of the treasury of Atreus, were monumental, their grave goods dazzling. Gold death masks, swords inlaid with lion hunts, intricate jewelry, all hint at a society that prized wealth and status, power and legacy. And yet, by 1100 BCE, the palaces were gone. Not slowly, not gently, but abruptly. Burned, abandoned, forgotten. What happened to the Mycenaeans? Mainstream explanations point, once again, to a convergence of pressures. Earthquakes, which are frequent in the region, may have destabilized their infrastructure. Shifting trade routes and resource depletion could have strained their economy. Internal rebellion, sparked by inequality or famine, may have erupted into violence. But many scholars believe the fall was part of a broader pattern, the so-called Bronze Age collapse, a sweeping, near-simultaneous downfall of multiple advanced civilizations around the Eastern Mediterranean. The Hittites, the Egyptians, the cities of the Levant. All suffered within a century of one another. All left behind the same traces: fire, silence, and disruption. One common suspect in this collapse is the enigmatic Sea Peoples, recorded in Egyptian texts as fierce naval raiders who struck from the waves, plundering cities and toppling kingdoms. Who were they? Displaced Mycenaeans? Mercenaries turned pirates? A coalition of desperate migrants? The evidence is scattered. The names are foreign. The timelines blurry. And yet, across Greece, the signs are unmistakable. The great palaces fall. Writing disappears. Monumental construction ends. The Mycenaean world dissolves into what would later be called the Greek Dark Age, a period of smaller settlements, fewer goods, and forgotten knowledge. But not all was lost. Oral traditions endured. Mycenaean motifs survived in local cults and religious practices. And generations later, as the Greek city-states began to rise again, the memory of Mycenae returned, not as fact, but as legend. Homer's epics, composed centuries after the Mycenaean fall, describe a world of bronze-clad heroes and divine war. Archaeologists have since matched many of his descriptions, places like Pylos and Troy, to real locations, lending credence to the idea that behind the myth was a memory, however distorted. Still, questions remain. Why did a civilization so advanced, literate, organized, far-reaching, fail to adapt to the mounting pressures of its time? Why did none of the palatial centers survive in any meaningful form? And why did no successor state emerge to take their place? Some speculate that their system was too centralized, too dependent on a fragile elite. When the palaces fell, so too did their means of administration, record-keeping, and redistribution. Others suggest the Mycenaeans were victims of their own success, stretching too far, demanding too much, leaving themselves vulnerable to the very world they helped build. More speculative ideas point to internal revolutions, lower classes rising against their rulers, or even spiritual upheaval. Did religious beliefs shift? Did omens or oracles drive decisions that led to ruin? Fringe theories have proposed everything from Atlantean analogues to ancient cosmic events, but evidence remains elusive. What the ruins show us is not a single moment of collapse, but a slow unraveling, pockets of resistance, efforts to rebuild, and eventually, silence. Today, Mycenae stands exposed to wind and time. Tourists walk through its ancient gate. The bones of the palace rise only waist-high. But the grandeur is still there, in the weight of the stones, in the layout of the rooms, in the myths that cling like ivy to its crumbling walls. And so we ask, was Mycenae the first great civilization of Europe, or merely the first to fall? How much of our own memory is myth, and how much of their myth was memory? In the fading gold of their graves and the burnt clay of their tablets, the Mycenaeans left us pieces of a puzzle, pieces that continue to shift, whisper, and ask us to look again. And as the legacy of the Mycenaeans fades into myth and ruin, we turn now to the highlands of East Africa, to a place often overlooked in the ancient world's grand narrative, yet once powerful enough to shape the course of trade, religion, and empire. Here, in the silence of the northern Ethiopian plateau, rise stone monoliths that seem to defy time. In their shadows lies the forgotten heart of a kingdom that once ruled the Red Sea. The Aksumite Empire, obelisks in the highlands. The sun rises slowly over the Ethiopian highlands, casting long shadows across fields of basalt and dry grass. Amid the scattered trees and quiet hills, a collection of towering obelisks pierces the sky. Some still standing, others toppled, cracked by age and mystery. These are the stelae of Aksum. Some reach nearly 80 feet into the air, carved from single pieces of stone. Each is detailed with false doors, windows, and architectural flourishes, as though mimicking the structures of a city that once lived but has long since vanished. Beneath them lie tombs, deep, multi-chambered, sealed in silence. Who were the people who built them? And why did their kingdom, once counted among the greatest in the ancient world, slip so quietly from memory? From the 1st to the 8th century CE, the Aksumite Empire flourished across what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. At its height, Aksum commanded trade routes that stretched across the Red Sea into Arabia, along the Nile into Nubia, and out to the ports of the Indian Ocean. Roman and Persian merchants recognized it as one of the great powers of its time, alongside China, Persia, and the Empire of Rome. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a 1st century Greek maritime guide, describes Aksum's port of Adulis as a vital node in global trade. Ivory, gold, frankincense, and exotic animals flowed from Africa's interior through Aksum to the world beyond. In return came silk, glass, and spices. Aksumite coins, some of the earliest minted in sub-Saharan Africa, circulated widely, bearing the names and faces of its kings. The empire's influence was not just economic, but spiritual. In the 4th century, King Ezana converted to Christianity, making Aksum one of the earliest states to officially adopt the faith. This was a seismic shift, occurring even before the Roman Empire embraced Christianity as its official religion. Ancient inscriptions in Ge'ez, Greek, and Sabaean script tell of campaigns, victories, and alliances. And yet, despite this wealth of evidence, much about Aksum remains unclear. Who first established the city? What were the origins of its people? How did it rise so rapidly? And how did it fall? The ruins of Aksum reveal layers of complexity: subterranean tombs carved with precision, foundations of palaces and churches, inscriptions that reference distant lands and conquered peoples. But no comprehensive archives have been found, no epic texts, no royal chronicles. The memory of Aksum lives in fragments, stone, coin, and legend. Some scholars suggest that Aksum emerged from earlier kingdoms in the region, influenced by trade and migration from southern Arabia. The architectural styles and inscriptions show clear connections to the Sabaeans of Yemen. But the culture that developed in Aksum was distinct, African in root, global in reach. What's more mysterious is the sudden change that occurred between the 7th and 8th centuries. The empire, once prosperous and outward-facing, withdrew from its coastal ports. Trade routes shifted. Aksum's influence diminished. By the 10th century, it had effectively vanished as a political force. Why? Traditional explanations include economic decline, environmental degradation, and the rise of Islamic powers that disrupted Red Sea commerce. Some point to soil exhaustion and deforestation in the highlands, which may have undermined agricultural stability. Others suggest internal strife, dynastic conflict, or fragmentation of power. And yet, the signs are subtle. There is no great destruction layer, no dramatic invasion recorded. The fall of Aksum seems to have been gradual, almost quiet, a withdrawal into the hills, a receding into history. More speculative ideas suggest that religious tensions may have played a role between traditional beliefs, early Christianity, and later Islamic influences. Others note the curious timing of the decline, coinciding with a shift in the Earth's climate, a so-called late antique Little Ice Age that affected agriculture and migration across many regions. Still, others ask deeper questions. Why are so many of Aksum's greatest structures, its tallest obelisks, its finest tombs, still unexplained in purpose? Were they simple grave markers or something more symbolic? Some stelae were never erected, left lying near the quarry, as though their construction was suddenly halted. Why? And what of the Ark? One of Ethiopia's most enduring legends is that the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest of the Israelites, was brought to Aksum by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark still rests in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, guarded by a single monk and hidden from all eyes. Is this just myth? Or could Aksum have preserved something truly ancient and powerful within its walls? We may never know. The secrets of Aksum lie beneath the stone and behind the silence of centuries. Much of its past is still waiting to be uncovered, buried in the highland soil, obscured by time, protected by tradition. And so we are left with a question. How did an empire once counted among the world's greatest fade into near obscurity? And what forgotten knowledge, what wisdom, what warnings might still lie etched in the basalt of Aksum, waiting for the right eyes to see? And as the sun sets over the silent stelae of Aksum, casting long shadows across stone carved in forgotten tongues, we now cross the Red Sea, to the arid mountains and green valleys of southern Arabia. Here, among desert winds and terraced hillsides, lie the remains of a kingdom that once ruled incense roads and coastal ports. A kingdom caught between empires and belief, remembered only in fragments. This is the story of Himyar, the kingdom of Himyar, stones, smoke, and silence. In the highlands of present-day Yemen, the landscape is both harsh and beautiful. Steep mountain ranges rise from desert plains, their slopes carved into terraces that have sustained life for millennia. The air is dry, spiced with the scent of frankincense trees, and scattered among the rocks are the worn remains of stone cities, fortresses built into hillsides, inscriptions in ancient South Arabian script, and foundations of once mighty walls. This is where the Himyarites once ruled. The kingdom of Himyar emerged around the 2nd century BCE, rising after the decline of earlier southern Arabian powers such as Saba and Qataban. Strategically located along the incense trade routes that connected India, Africa, and the Mediterranean, Himyar flourished as a commercial and cultural crossroads. Their capital, Zafar, perched atop a windswept plateau, once buzzed with markets, temples, and royal halls. Today, only weathered stones remain. Few visitors reach its remote heights. Fewer still grasp the full weight of what once stood here. For several centuries, Himyar controlled vast swaths of southern Arabia. Its rulers minted coins, built dams, and expanded a sophisticated irrigation system that turned barren hillsides into arable land. Their inscriptions, carved in Musnad script, document royal decrees, victories, and alliances. But even in these texts, questions linger. Who were the Himyarites truly? They absorbed older kingdoms, blending Sabaean traditions with their own. They spoke a distinct dialect of Old South Arabian. Their architecture mirrored both African and Arabian influences. And perhaps most curiously, they navigated a complex and shifting religious identity, one that would place them at the center of some of late antiquity's most enigmatic conflicts. In the early centuries of the Common Era, Himyar appears to have followed a traditional polytheistic system, worshipping local deities tied to nature, fertility, and celestial forces. But by the 4th century CE, something changed. A move toward monotheism, gradual at first, then decisive. Some scholars believe the Himyarite elite embraced Judaism, not the Judaism of distant exile, but a local, syncretic version deeply rooted in Arabian soil. Inscriptions from the period reference the Lord of the heavens and earth, rather than specific tribal gods. By the reign of King Yusuf Yathar, known in later sources as Du Nuwas, this transformation was complete. But why did a South Arabian kingdom adopt Judaism as its state religion? Theories vary. Some propose it was a political act, an effort to assert independence from Christian Byzantium and Zoroastrian Persia, both of whom sought influence in the region. Others suggest deeper, organic ties between Arabian tribes and Jewish communities that had settled in the peninsula for centuries. Whatever the reason, the consequences were profound. By the early 6th century, Himyar was at the heart of a religious and geopolitical firestorm. Du Nuwas, a zealous Jewish king, launched a campaign against Christian communities in the region, most infamously at Najran, where, according to Christian sources, thousands were killed for refusing to renounce their faith. This act drew the attention of greater powers. The Christian kingdom of Aksum, just across the sea in Ethiopia, invaded Himyar with support from the Byzantine Empire. Du Nuwas was defeated. Himyar's Jewish monarchy was replaced by Christian rulers loyal to Aksum, and the kingdom's independence faded into history. But what truly happened in these final years? The sources are conflicting. Christian texts paint Du Nuwas as a brutal persecutor. Some Islamic traditions remember him as a defiant figure resisting foreign domination. Jewish memory is quieter, more ambiguous. Archaeology confirms that something dramatic occurred: burned layers, sudden shifts in material culture, the abrupt end of royal inscriptions. And then, silence. The Himyarites disappear from history. Their cities fall to ruin. Their language is lost. Their religion, whatever form it had taken, is erased. But even in the absence, the questions persist. Why did a thriving kingdom, with advanced infrastructure and regional influence, collapse so quickly? Was its fall the result of religious zeal or imperial geopolitics? Did Du Nuwas act out of conviction or desperation? And how deep did monotheism truly run among the Himyarite people? Was it a royal policy or a widespread transformation? More speculative theories have emerged. Some suggest the Himyarite conversion to Judaism was not isolated, but part of a larger, now lost monotheistic movement across the ancient Near East. Others wonder if the kingdom held deeper knowledge, texts, traditions, or relics that have yet to be uncovered. The region remains under-excavated, its archaeology hindered by geography and conflict. And then there is the matter of their language. The old South Arabian scripts are slowly being decoded, but many inscriptions remain untranslated. What might still lie on unstudied tablets or beneath the sands of Zafar? What truths are hidden in plain sight, waiting for context? Today, Himyar is remembered only faintly. Its kings do not appear in most history books. Its monuments stand unvisited. And yet, in the stone walls of ancient Zafar, in the weathered inscriptions clinging to remote cliffs, there is a presence, faint but persistent. A kingdom that rose in isolation, thrived in complexity, and vanished in mystery. And so we are left to ask, what was lost when Himyar fell? And what fragments of its story still lie hidden in the hills of southern Arabia, waiting for the right moment to speak? And as the winds of southern Arabia whisper through the ruins of Himyar, faint echoes of kings and creeds lost to time, we turn now to the heart of the Mediterranean, to gentle hills and golden fields of central Italy, where beneath vineyards and olive groves lie the tombs of a forgotten people. Their cities were older than Rome. Their language still resists full translation. Their art, their rituals, their identity, shrouded in half-light. These were the Etruscans. The Etruscans, forgotten architects of the Italian soul. In the soft rolling countryside of Tuscany, ancient doorways open into the earth. Cut into rock, sealed for centuries, they lead into tombs unlike any others in the ancient world. Inside, the walls bloom with vibrant color, scenes of dancing, feasting, music, and myth. Men and women recline together in painted banquets, their eyes large, their expressions serene. It is a world that feels intimate, refined, and hauntingly alien. These tombs are among the most vivid legacies of the Etruscans, a people who thrived in central Italy from roughly 900 BCE to 100 BCE. They built cities, developed writing, engineered roads and aqueducts, and held a deep reverence for the afterlife. Yet, despite their sophistication and regional power, the Etruscans remain one of the great enigmas of antiquity. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why did they vanish so completely? Classical authors offered their own theories. Herodotus claimed the Etruscans were migrants from Lydia, a distant land in Anatolia, driven westward by famine. Dionysius of Halicarnassus, on the other hand, argued they were native to Italy, an indigenous culture with deep prehistoric roots. Modern archaeology and genetics have yet to offer a definitive answer. Some evidence supports continuity with earlier Villanovan peoples. Other findings hint at Eastern connections, shared motifs, burial customs, linguistic parallels, but nothing conclusive. Their language is perhaps the greatest puzzle. Etruscan writing appears on thousands of inscriptions, on tombs, mirrors, pottery, and bronze tablets. The alphabet is adapted from early Greek, and many words can be phonetically sounded out. But beyond a handful of known terms, names, dates, ritual phrases, the language remains largely undeciphered. It is not Indo-European like Latin or Greek. It stands apart, isolated, a language without family, a voice from the past, heard but not understood. And yet, their influence was enormous. Before Rome was Rome, Etruscan kings ruled the hills of Latium. The Romans borrowed heavily from Etruscan culture, religious rituals, architectural forms, even the tradition of gladiatorial combat. The fasces, symbol of Roman power, was Etruscan in origin. So was the practice of reading omens from animal entrails. Etruscan engineers taught the early Romans how to drain marshes, build stone arches, and organize cities. But despite this legacy, the Etruscans themselves left behind no epic histories, no grand temples of marble, no detailed account of their origins or worldview. What we know through fragments, through the lenses of their conquerors, or through the silent testimony of their tombs. The Etruscans were a deeply religious people. Their cosmology divided the sky into sections, each ruled by a specific deity. Lightning was not just weather, it was a message. Their priests, known as haruspices, specialized in reading divine will from signs in nature. Ritual and divination were embedded in public life. Death, too, was not an end, but a continuation. Their tombs are not dark places of mourning, but vivid reconstructions of the world above. Some resemble domestic interiors, beds, chairs, painted doorways, designed to make the soul feel at home. Others are grand and solemn, carved deep into stone, with monumental sarcophagi bearing sculpted likenesses of the dead. But even here, questions arise. Why did this civilization, so advanced and artistically expressive, never unify into a single empire? The Etruscan world was divided into city-states, Tarquinia, Veii, Clusium, Cerveteri, linked by trade and culture, but often politically fragmented. Was it this lack of unity that left them vulnerable to Rome's rise, or was there more at play? By the 4th century BCE, Etruria began to lose ground. Roman expansion pushed northward, absorbing city after city. Etruscan identity did not vanish overnight, but it faded, assimilated. Names changed. Language gave way to Latin. Temples fell silent. By the late Republic, the Etruscans were no longer a distinct people, but a memory. And yet, their memory lingers in strange ways. In Rome's rituals, in Tuscan soil, in the quiet persistence of mysteries we cannot fully explain. Some scholars have noted the uniqueness of Etruscan gender roles. Unlike in Greece or Rome, Etruscan women appear as equals in banquet scenes, with their names proudly inscribed alongside those of men. Was this a more egalitarian society? Or have we misunderstood the symbolism? Others point to certain tombs and artifacts, mirrors engraved with mythological scenes not found in Greek or Roman versions, suggesting a parallel tradition of myth. Where did these stories come from? What deeper cultural well did the Etruscans draw from? More speculative ideas suggest lost libraries or knowledge systems now extinct. A few theorists, reaching further still, propose that the Etruscans may have preserved spiritual or astronomical knowledge passed down from older, forgotten civilizations. But the evidence is elusive. The gaps are wide. And so, we are left with silhouettes of dancers painted on tomb walls, of inscriptions that speak but do not explain, of a people once central to the ancient Mediterranean, now reduced to echoes. The Etruscans are not entirely gone. Their legacy lives in stone, in words, in roads, and rituals. But the essence of who they were, what they believed, how they saw the world, remains just beyond our grasp. And so we wonder, what truths lie beneath the hills of Tuscany, waiting in the dark? And if the Etruscans could speak to us now, what would they say? And as the enigmatic traces of the Etruscans fade into the hills of Tuscany, their voices muffled by time and stone, we now drift west, toward the Atlantic winds and the rugged estuaries of southern Iberia. Here, beyond the ancient pillars of Hercules, whispers of a forgotten kingdom still echo through salt marshes and sun-baked plains. A land once rich in gold and mystery. A people known as the Tartessians. The Tartessians, the lost kingdom of the western edge. Along the banks of the Guadalquivir River in southern Spain, the light strikes the landscape with a golden softness. The wide, meandering river once flowed through a region of extraordinary wealth, dense with mineral veins, fertile land, and access to both the Atlantic and Mediterranean seas. Somewhere here, beneath layers of soil and centuries of silence, lay Tartessos, an ancient kingdom, a vanished city, or perhaps something else entirely. The Greeks spoke of Tartessos as early as the 7th century BCE. To them, it was a land of abundance at the far western edge of the known world. Herodotus described it as a rich and ancient place ruled by a just king, Argantonios, who lived an improbably long life. Other Greek writers referred to its navigable rivers, its vast herds, and its trade in precious metals, especially silver and gold. Some even suggested that the ships of Tartessos reached the shores of distant lands, but for all the accounts, Tartessos remained vague. A place both real and unreal, mentioned often, but never clearly placed. Its language, undeciphered; its people, elusive; its disappearance, sudden. Archaeology has found hints, settlements near Huelva, Seville, and Cadiz, sites rich in bronze and luxury goods, bearing signs of contact with Phoenicians from the eastern Mediterranean. Intricately worked gold and silver artifacts, buried in hoards or hidden in tombs, testify to a civilization of remarkable craftsmanship and wealth. The treasure of El Carambolo, discovered near Seville in 1958, is one of the most striking finds: 21 pieces of exquisite gold jewelry, adorned with geometric motifs and patterns. Were they ceremonial ornaments of Tartessian elites, religious offerings, or perhaps diplomatic gifts from a culture that straddled the boundary between Iberian roots and Phoenician influence? And yet, the Tartessians themselves left no great monuments, no enduring written record. Their script, found in inscriptions scattered across southwestern Iberia, remains only partially understood, an alphabet that seems to blend local Iberian elements with Eastern Mediterranean ones. But the meaning of the texts remains locked. Who were these people who flourished for centuries, then disappeared? Most historians agree that Tartessos reached its zenith between the 9th and 6th centuries BCE, when its control over the region's mineral wealth made it a key player in Mediterranean trade. Phoenician merchants from Tyre and Sidon sailed west to extract silver from the mountains of Iberia, bringing with them their gods, their writing, and their techniques. For a time, Tartessos may have been a hybrid civilization, indigenous Iberian in origin, but profoundly shaped by contact with the East. Some scholars suggest its religious practices were influenced by Phoenician deities like Baal and Astarte. Others point to its artistic styles and burial customs as evidence of cultural fusion. But then, sometime around 500 BCE, Tartessos vanishes from the record. The Greek texts go silent. The settlements are abandoned. The name disappears. What happened? One theory holds that the Carthaginians, heirs to the Phoenician legacy, destroyed Tartessos to eliminate a rival. With their growing maritime dominance, they may have suppressed competing powers along the Iberian coast. Another possibility is environmental, changing river patterns, or a catastrophic flood disrupting trade and agriculture. Some suggest internal decline, social unrest, or the collapse of trade networks that had sustained the kingdom's elite. But none of these explanations is complete. No single event explains the sudden and thorough erasure of a once thriving culture. And this is where the mystery deepens. For centuries, Tartessos has been linked, by scholars and dreamers alike, to the legend of Atlantis. The Greek philosopher Plato, writing in the 4th century BCE, described Atlantis as a mighty kingdom beyond the Pillars of Hercules, destroyed in a single day and night. The parallels, geography, sudden disappearance, wealth, and isolation have fueled speculation. Could Tartessos have been a memory of a much older myth? Or did the legend of Atlantis draw from the fate of Tartessos itself? Mainstream historians remain cautious. The connections are tantalizing but unproven. Still, the enigma of Tartessos continues to draw attention, not because of what we know, but because of how much we don't. Excavations in the region continue to uncover new clues. Recent finds suggest more complex urban layouts, defensive walls, and even ritual structures. Some researchers believe that Tartessos may lie beneath the wetlands of Doñana National Park, its ruins hidden beneath layers of sediment and time. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging have revealed anomalies, but no definitive city. And what of their beliefs, their myths, their view of the cosmos? Unlike the Greeks or Egyptians, the Tartessians left no enduring mythological texts. What they feared, what they worshipped, how they saw life and death, these remain questions unanswered. Their art speaks in silence, their script just out of reach, their history a shadow cast across the western horizon of the ancient world. And so, we are left to wonder, was Tartessos a kingdom, a culture, a crossroads of trade and faith? Or was it something more ephemeral, an idea, a memory, a forgotten mirror of a world long lost? And if it once stood where rivers now run and marshes bloom, how close are we to finding its voice again, buried beneath the reeds and salt? And as the legend of Tartessos dissolves into marshland and myth, we turn now toward a rugged coastline where mountains meet turquoise waters, a place of steep cliffs, hidden coves, and tombs carved into living stone. Here, among the jagged shores of southwestern Anatolia, the Lycians built a world both visible and secret, a culture etched into the rocks and yet still cloaked in mystery. The Lycians, guardians of the cliffs and shadows. In the warm light of the Turkish sun, the ancient necropolis of Myra clings to a limestone cliff, its facades worn but still majestic. Dozens of tombs are cut directly into the rock face, their entrances shaped like wooden doors, their architecture echoing the wooden homes of the living. High above the valley floor, they overlook the land as if the ancestors themselves still keep watch. These are the tombs of the Lycians. Who they were remains partly a mystery. Their language is poorly understood. Their cities, though monumental, are often buried beneath newer layers of civilization. And yet, they left behind a legacy that continues to intrigue scholars and travelers alike, a people whose customs defied their neighbors and whose memory survives in fragments. The Lycians occupied a stretch of coastal Anatolia known in antiquity as Lycia, a region between the Greek world and the inland empires of the East. From around the 2nd millennium BCE through to their absorption by the Roman Empire, the Lycians maintained a distinct identity. They were known to the Egyptians, to the Hittites, to the Persians and Greeks, sometimes as allies, sometimes as rebels, and always as something different. Herodotus described them as descendants of Cretan exiles, a people who had wandered until they found a new home. Other sources suggest they were native to the land, heirs to an earlier Bronze Age culture known from Hittite texts as the Luca. Whatever their origin, the Lycians were never easily categorized. Their writing system, an Anatolian language written in its own unique script, remains only partially deciphered. Though later they adopted Greek, many early inscriptions remain untranslated, leaving us with names, titles, and tantalizing fragments of unknown meaning. But what is known of their society hints at something unusual. The Lycians practiced a form of matrilineal descent, one of the very few such systems in the ancient Mediterranean. According to Herodotus, Lycian children took their names not from their fathers, but from their mothers. Property and status passed through the female line. Was this merely symbolic, or a deeper reflection of gender dynamics in their culture? What would such a system mean for politics, power, or daily life? The answers remain elusive. Their cities, Xanthos, Tylos, Patara, were autonomous, yet part of a larger federation. Unlike the fiercely independent polis of Greece, the Lycian League appears to have been a coordinated confederation, complete with proportional representation and elected officials. Even the framers of the U.S. Constitution later studied its model. But how did such political sophistication emerge in a land so mountainous, so fractured by terrain. Lycia's geography may have been both a challenge and a safeguard. The rugged land discouraged large-scale conquest and fostered a fierce sense of independence. When the Persians came, the Lycians resisted. When Alexander the Great arrived, they negotiated. When Rome rose, they cooperated on their own terms. And yet, despite their diplomacy, their cities bear the marks of struggle. At Xanthos, the site of one of the greatest Lycian cities, a grim episode is recorded in ancient sources. When Persian forces besieged the city in the 6th century BCE, the inhabitants reportedly burned their own homes, killed their families, and made a final charge against the invaders, a mass act of defiance and despair. Archaeology confirms a layer of intense destruction. But was it a heroic stand, or a myth constructed in hindsight? Not all Lycian mysteries are so grim. Some are carved in stone. The rock-cut tombs are perhaps their most iconic legacy. Often placed in high, inaccessible places, these tombs were not simply resting places. They were symbols of status, of ancestral presence, and perhaps something more. Some scholars believe the placement of the tombs, high above the world of the living, reflects a belief in the soul's journey skyward. Others suggest a symbolic merging of domestic and spiritual realms, as many tombs mimic the design of Lycian houses. And then there are the sarcophagi, massive curved-lid structures placed both within tombs and in open spaces. Many are elaborately carved with scenes of battles, mythological creatures, or abstract symbols. One, now displayed in Istanbul, bears the mysterious reliefs of a winged figure holding what looks like a flower, or perhaps a flame. What were these symbols meant to convey? A vision of the afterlife? A spiritual code now lost? Some more speculative theories suggest the Lycians may have preserved elements of an even older spiritual tradition, one predating Greek or Anatolian pantheons. Echoes of their beliefs remain in myths. The sea god Glaucus, the nymphs of Latun, the oracle shrines where earth and water were believed to speak. Did the Lycians possess esoteric knowledge, astronomical, symbolic, ritual, that was buried with them? Or were they simply a practical people, rooted in a harsh land, expressing their reverence for life and death in stone? Even their end remains quiet. Over time, Lycian culture blended into the Hellenistic world. Their language faded, their cities became Roman provinces, their traditions dissolved into the broader currents of empire. But the cliffs remain, the tombs still stare out across the valleys and seas. The names on their stone facades still resist translation, and the silence between them is not empty, but waiting. So we are left to ask, who were the Lycians, traders, warriors, poets of stone? And what truths might still lie hidden in the rocks above the sea, carved just out of reach? And as the carved tombs of the Lycians gaze silently across Anatolia's ancient hills, we shift our focus to the towering spine of South America, the Andes, a land of thin air and sacred mountains, where empires rose not from the sea, but from the stone terraces and cloud-draped valleys of highland plateaus. Long before the Incas would cast their shadow over the Andes, other civilizations carved their place into this formidable landscape. Among them, the Huarpa and the Wari. The Huarpa and Wari, threads of empire in the Andean highlands. In the central highlands of Peru, the dry, golden grasses ripple in the mountain wind. The land here feels ancient, endlessly folded, silent, vast. Dotted across these valleys and ridges are remnants of walls and plazas, once bustling centers of life, now quietly surrendering to earth and time. In the Ayacucho Valley lies the site of Huari, capital of the Wari Empire, and once the beating heart of a civilization that stretched across much of the Andes. But before the Wari rose to power, there was Huarpa, a lesser-known yet deeply influential culture. And from the fragments left behind, ceramics, stone foundations, and spiritual spaces, a layered story begins to emerge. The Huarpa culture thrived from around 200 BCE to 500 CE, a quiet yet pivotal presence in the Ayacucho region. Unlike the monumental architecture of later Andean societies, Huarpa settlements were modest. Clusters of stone buildings, localized water management, and finely crafted ceramics that bore geometric designs and abstract patterns. These patterns would not disappear, they would evolve. By around 500 CE, something shifted. In place of the smaller, loosely connected Huarpa villages, rose the urban, organized, and expansive culture known as the Wari. But was this a sudden transformation, or a slow unfolding? Archaeological evidence suggests that Wari culture did not erase the Huarpa. Instead, it absorbed and restructured it, layering new ideas over old foundations. New cities emerged, roads were built across the highlands and coast, and architecture became more formal. Modular layouts, orthogonal city planning, and massive administrative compounds designed not just for living, but for control. Huari, the Wari capital, sprawled across hundreds of hectares. It was a city of high walls, narrow corridors, and sectorized spaces, built for ceremony, for governance, and perhaps for secrecy. Unlike the open plazas of later Inca cities, Wari sites often feel inward-facing, contained, protective. What was this architecture hiding? The Wari are often described as the first empire of the Andes, a model that the Incas would later inherit and expand. They established administrative centers in distant regions, introduced a standardized style of pottery and iconography, and appear to have organized labor and land use on an impressive scale. And yet, much about them remains unknown. They left no written language, no surviving chronicles, no detailed oral histories. We know them through their material legacy: ceramics, textiles, bones, and walls. Among the most haunting of these remnants are the D-shaped temples found at several Wari sites. Their unique form stands out in a region where square and rectangular structures dominate. Were these temples aligned to celestial events? Were they linked to fertility rituals, ancestor worship, or something else entirely? And then there are the tombs. At the site of Conchapata, not far from the capital, archaeologists uncovered large ceremonial vessels depicting human faces, some serene, others grimacing. Many of these vessels were smashed deliberately as part of ritual offerings. Some contained human remains. Was this a ceremonial act of reverence? A way to release the spirit from the vessel? Or something darker? Later discoveries at Cerro Baul, a Wari outpost in the south, revealed more ritual complexity. Here, atop a mesa, elites once gathered for feasts and libations. Entire breweries, massive facilities used to produce chicha, a fermented corn beer, suggest that Wari rituals were social, political, and deeply symbolic. But how centralized was their power? Was Wari rule imperial in the strict sense, or a network of alliances held together by culture, religion, and exchange? Some researchers argue the Wari did not control territory through conquest, but through influence. Their roads, textiles, and ritual imagery, especially the fearsome staff god figure, created a kind of ideological cohesion. Others suggest they imposed rule more directly, with fortified sites and administrative governors. Either way, by the 10th century CE, the Wari world began to fracture. Cities were abandoned. Regional centers lost prominence. The reasons are unclear. Environmental stress, such as drought, may have played a role. Social unrest, overextension, or shifting belief systems could also have contributed. And then, as with many ancient civilizations, they faded. But what of the transformation from Huarpa to Wari? Was it peaceful evolution or orchestrated revolution? Why did the Wari, unlike the later Inca, design cities with such inward focus? Was it an architectural expression of hierarchy or something more metaphysical? Some more speculative theories suggest the Wari maintained esoteric traditions now lost to us, ritual knowledge encoded in textile patterns or temple geometry. The repetition of certain symbols across vast distances hints at shared cosmologies, but without texts, their meaning remains locked. Still others wonder if the Wari deliberately erased earlier beliefs as they rose, absorbing Huarpa customs while concealing or transforming their spiritual core. Today, the highlands are quiet again. The roads have crumbled. The temples stand open to the wind. Yet pottery shards still surface in the soil. Walls still trace their strange, precise angles. And in the silence between Huarpa and Wari, a question lingers. What if we are not seeing the remnants of two cultures, but of a single, continuous thread, woven through ritual, migration, and time? And what forgotten knowledge, what ancient understanding of space, spirit, and society might still lie buried beneath the highland stones, waiting for us to remember? And as the silent stones of the Andean highlands whisper the layered legacy of Huarpa and Wari, we journey now to another kind of silence, one not high in the clouds, but deep in the sands. In a region where the desert seems eternal and lifeless, far from the Nile's green banks, an ancient mystery waits. Buried beneath dust and time, in a place once watered by rains long gone, the stones of Nabta Playa rise like the bones of a forgotten age. Nabta Playa, stone circles beneath the Sahara sky. At first glance, it looks like nothing. A barren basin in southern Egypt near the Sudanese border. The sand stretches endlessly in every direction, broken only by flat rocks and wind-shaped dunes. There is no river here, no fertile valley, no great pyramid or towering monument. But then, the eye adjusts. Scattered across this desolate plain are stones, upright, deliberate, placed, circles, lines, standing monoliths no taller than a man. At their center, a cluster of stones aligned in ways that hint at something deeper, something purposeful. This is Nabta Playa, and it may be one of the oldest known ceremonial sites in the world. Long before dynasties rose along the Nile, before hieroglyphs carved the stories of kings and gods, this desert basin held seasonal lakes and supported a small but sophisticated pastoralist community. Between 7,000 and 6,000 years ago, at a time when the Sahara was not the wasteland it is today, people gathered here. They built hearths, dug wells, grazed cattle, and, perhaps most intriguingly, they raised stones toward the sky. What did they see? The central feature of Nabta Playa is a stone circle, roughly 3 meters across, with narrow slabs standing upright in the middle. Some researchers believe this arrangement may represent one of the world's earliest known astronomical observatories. The alignment of certain stones appears to correspond with the rising of the summer solstice sun and the positions of certain stars, including Orion's belt. If true, this would suggest that the people of Nabta Playa were not only observing the heavens, they were organizing their lives, rituals, and perhaps even their cosmology around them. But how did such an early society, lacking written language or advanced tools, achieve this precision? What knowledge did they possess? And where did it come from? Mainstream archaeologists see Nabta Playa as a vital precursor to ancient Egyptian civilization. The cattle cults, the solar alignments, the ceremonial spaces, all of them echo later practices along the Nile. Some have even suggested that the religious and symbolic frameworks of Egypt may have roots here, in the forgotten heart of the Sahara. Others point to the symbolic burials found nearby, stone-covered tumuli containing cattle remains, carefully placed in pits lined with clay. These were not ordinary food offerings or trash heaps. They were deliberate, ceremonial, and they may mark some of the earliest examples of ritual sacrifice in North Africa. But the mystery goes further. The people of Nabta Playa did not leave behind temples or statues, no tombs or royal names. Their culture is known only through stones, bones, and the faint imprint of structures long erased by wind and time. Who were they? The ceramics found at the site suggest connections to both Nile Valley and sub-Saharan traditions. Their lifestyle was semi-nomadic, yet they returned to Nabta Playa seasonally for centuries, perhaps for rituals tied to water, the stars, or both. It was a place of gathering, of ceremony, perhaps pilgrimage. Then, around 5,000 years ago, the climate shifted. The monsoons moved south, the lakes dried, the people left, and the desert claimed what remained. Today, the site is remote, isolated, and exposed. The stones still stand, but their meaning remains elusive. Some scholars argue that the astronomical alignments are overstated, that they may be coincidental or less precise than claimed. Others insist the patterns are intentional, embedded with a knowledge system we barely understand. And then, there are the more speculative ideas. Some have proposed that Nabta Playa represents a forgotten cradle of civilization, older than Sumer or Egypt, that its builders were proto-scientists, mapping the heavens with a clarity lost to modern memory. A few go further still, linking the site to ancient advanced knowledge or even lost civilizations of prehistory. But the evidence remains grounded. There are no hidden technologies, no lost continents, only stones. Still, they are stones that raise questions. Why did these people, without metal tools or complex architecture, invest such effort in arranging slabs and building ceremonial spaces? What were they observing? What did they believe? And how did their knowledge, if it was truly astronomical, come to be? Perhaps the most haunting mystery of Nabta Playa is not its age, or its alignments, or even its disappearance, but its silence. We know so little. Their voices are gone, their language unrecorded, their symbols undecoded. Yet something compelled them to return, year after year, to this remote place, to face the horizon, to bury the sacred, to raise stones in alignment with the stars. And so we are left to ask, what truths did the people of Nabta Playa find in the desert sky? And what more might be buried beneath the shifting sands, waiting to tell a story as old as time itself? And as the wind drifts across the empty basin of Nabta Playa, stirring the sand that once mapped stars and guided sacred rituals, we move now across oceans and centuries, back to South America. Not to the towering Andes or the jungle-wrapped stones of Machu Picchu, but to the dry, desolate coast of Peru, a place few think of when imagining the birth of civilization. Yet here, in the river valleys of the Norte Chico region, stand the ruins of one of the oldest complex societies on Earth, silent, vast, and still not fully understood. The Norte Chico Civilization, ghost cities of the Pacific coast. The Peruvian coast is an improbable cradle for civilization, with its bone-dry plains, scorching sun, and a sky that almost never rains. It seems more a place of survival than of flourishing. Yet where rivers carve thin green ribbons into the desert, fed by snowmelt from the distant Andes, something extraordinary took shape. Scattered along the Supe, Pativilca, and Fortaleza river valleys are the remnants of ancient urban centers. Flat-topped pyramids made of stone and earth, plazas sunken into the ground, broad avenues and monumental staircases. These are the echoes of the Norte Chico civilization, also known as Caral Supi, named after the most famous of its cities, Caral. And they are old, very old. Radiocarbon dating places Caral as early as 2600 BCE, contemporary with the Old Kingdom of Egypt, predating the Olmecs by 2 millennia, and older than the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, and even the rise of Sumerian city-states. Yet the cities of Norte Chico lacked the traditional signatures of early empires: no pottery, no written language, no evidence of warfare. And yet, here was complexity, organized labor, monumental architecture, social stratification, and centralized planning. What kind of civilization leaves such a deep footprint without the tools we usually associate with development? The site of Caral itself spans over 60 hectares. At its heart stands a massive stepped pyramid, more than 90 feet tall, constructed from stone and filled with smaller rooms and chambers. Around it, residential platforms and ceremonial spaces form a carefully arranged cityscape. Bones of anchovy and sardine litter the middens, alongside cotton fibers and domesticated plant remains: squash, beans, guava. A dual economy of the sea and the land, harmonized in a way rarely seen. But who built Caral, and why here? Mainstream theories suggest that the predictable abundance of fish along the Peruvian coast, combined with the reliable floodwaters of the Andean rivers, provided the surplus needed to support a sedentary, hierarchical society. Cotton, grown inland, was used to make fishing nets, creating a cycle of mutual dependency between highland and coastal zones. This complex trade system may have encouraged cooperation or enforced control. Yet unlike other early civilizations, there is little evidence of conflict: no fortifications, no weapons, no mass graves from battle. How did such a society maintain order? Some researchers suggest religion played a central role. Flutes made from condor and pelican bones have been found in ceremonial spaces. Burnt offerings of plants and small animals suggest rituals. Geoglyphs etched into the earth, a precursor to the more famous Nazca lines, hint at sacred processions or symbolic landscapes. And then there is the architecture itself. Many of the pyramids appear aligned with celestial events: solstices, equinoxes, and the movement of the stars. At Caral, a series of standing stones form a solar observatory, tracking the seasons with precision. Were these people astronomers? Were their ceremonies timed to the heavens? Or was this knowledge inherited from an even earlier, undocumented source? The absence of writing deepens the mystery. How did such a large-scale society coordinate labor, manage resources, and transmit knowledge across generations without records? Did they use a system of oral tradition so refined that it rivaled written scripts? Or was there a form of communication, symbolic or mnemonic, that we simply have not yet recognized? Some have drawn comparisons to the Inca quipu, knotted cords used to store data. A few fragments of twisted string have been found at Norte Chico sites, but without context, their purpose remains speculative. And what of their legacy? For centuries, the cities of Norte Chico lay buried and forgotten, their stones mistaken for natural mounds. It was not until the late 20th century that their true age and scale were understood. Even now, only a fraction of the sites have been excavated. The civilization appears to have faded around 1800 BCE, with causes ranging from environmental shifts to internal restructuring. Unlike other collapses, there is no clear evidence of catastrophe. It is as if they simply stepped away. And this too raises questions. Was Norte Chico a dead end, an early experiment in urban life that left no heirs? Or was it the foundation for later Peruvian civilizations, Chavin, Moche, Nazca, Wari, whose symbols, structures, and beliefs may echo these ancient builders? Some fringe theories have gone further, proposing connections to lost Pacific cultures or even pre-Diluvian myths. They cite the isolation of Norte Chico, its advanced social organization, and its enigmatic architecture as signs of knowledge forgotten rather than discovered. But evidence remains elusive. And in the absence of writing, the stones must speak for themselves. Still, what they whisper is compelling. A civilization without conquest, a city without war, a society whose grandest expressions were ceremonial, not militaristic. And so we are left to wonder, what did the people of Norte Chico know that we have forgotten? What was their vision of life, of the stars, of power and harmony? And how much more of their story still lies beneath the sands and valleys of Peru, waiting for time to give it voice once more? And as the ghostly cities of Norte Chico retreat into the desert's hush, their vanished streets swallowed by time and dust, we sail now to another kind of disappearance, one not of a single people or place, but of many. Across the ancient Mediterranean, from the shores of Anatolia to the deltas of Egypt, something violent and sudden swept through the Bronze Age world. Temples burned, cities fell, kingdoms vanished, and at the heart of it all, shadows from the sea. The Sea Peoples, raiders of the Bronze Age twilight. In the fading light of history, etched into crumbling temple walls at Medinet Habu, a pharaoh stands defiant. Ramses III, sword raised, confronts a wave of enemies not seen before. They arrive not on chariots, but by ship. Their hairstyles are unfamiliar, plumed, elaborate. Their shields round. Their origins unnamed. The hieroglyphs speak of chaos, of war, of foreigners from the sea. We call them the Sea Peoples. They appear in the records of Egypt, Ugarit, Hattusa, and other late Bronze Age powers, always as outsiders, as destroyers, and always just at the moment when the great powers of the time began to collapse. But who were they? That is the enduring question, because while their impact is visible, their identity remains cloaked in mystery. Between 1200 and 1150 BCE, a storm of destruction swept the eastern Mediterranean. Mycenaean palaces were reduced to ash. The Hittite Empire fractured and disappeared. Coastal cities from Canaan to Cyprus were burned and abandoned. Even Egypt, under Ramses III, barely held its borders. Trade routes broke down. Writing systems were lost. It was, as some historians describe it, the world's first recorded Dark Age. In the midst of this collapse, the Sea Peoples emerged, mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions with names like Sherdun, Shekelesh, Luka, Peliset, and Denian. Some of these names resemble known ethnic groups. Others are wholly unfamiliar. The Egyptians describe how these groups arrived not as raiders, but as migrating families, men, women, and children, bringing ox carts and livestock. This was not simply invasion. It may have been displacement. But what drove them from their homes, and where had they come from? Mainstream theories suggest a complex convergence of factors. Climate change may have caused drought and famine in parts of the Aegean and eastern Mediterranean. Earthquakes, known to have rocked the region during this time, could have weakened cities just as these groups were on the move. Economic instability, caused by dependence on long-distance trade, may have tipped fragile systems into collapse. Into this vacuum stepped the Sea Peoples. Opportunists? Refugees? Warriors? Some scholars argue they were the very product of the collapse, a result, not a cause, that their migrations were responses to famine, conflict, or systemic failure. Others believe they were mercenaries, once hired by crumbling empires, who turned on their masters as stability failed. And then there are the more speculative theories. Some link the Sea Peoples to the fabled city of Troy, suggesting that survivors of the Trojan War, if it indeed occurred, became wandering warriors seeking new lands. Others draw connections to the Philistines, a group mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, who settled in Canaan and are thought by some to be descendants of the Peliset, one of the Sea Peoples named in Egyptian records. A few researchers have even proposed a Western origin, pointing to similarities in weaponry, armor, and ship design between the Sea Peoples and groups from Italy, Sardinia, and the Western Mediterranean. Could this have been a pan-Mediterranean migration, a domino effect of collapse spreading outward? Still, no single explanation answers all the questions. No homeland has been definitively identified. No texts from the Sea Peoples themselves have been found. No burial grounds, no settlements clearly attributed to them before their arrival on the historical stage. They remain, maddeningly, a presence defined by the destruction they left in their wake. And yet, they did not simply vanish. In some places, they became part of the new cultural landscape. The Peliset may have become the Philistines. The Shurden and Shekelesh may have settled in coastal regions and intermarried with local populations. New societies emerged from the ashes of the old, less centralized, more localized, but carrying echoes of what came before. Were the Sea Peoples a cause of collapse, or a symptom? Did they bring ruin to the Bronze Age world, or simply fill the void left by internal decline? Archaeology continues to search for answers. Shipwrecks off the coast of Turkey, hordes of weapons in the Levant, and collapsed walls in ancient cities all speak to a time of profound upheaval. But the Sea Peoples themselves remain like smoke, visible but impossible to grasp. And perhaps that is the heart of the mystery. For the Sea Peoples are not just a historical riddle, they are a symbol of transformation, a force that swept away what was and left behind the raw material from which the Iron Age would rise. But who were they truly? A confederation of displaced peoples? A coalition of rebels and warriors? A lost tribe now absorbed into the shadows of later cultures? Their ships have long since disappeared beneath the waves. Their names survive only in fragments. Their trail is one of fire and silence. And so we are left to ask, did the Sea Peoples carry with them forgotten knowledge, forgotten grievances, or simply the will to survive in a world already collapsing? And if they were not the end of an age, but its reckoning, what truths might still be hidden beneath the ash and sand of the Bronze Age world? And as the last echoes of the Sea Peoples vanish into the crashing surf of ancient shores, we shift now from the coasts of the Mediterranean to its most unforgiving interior. Beyond the reach of the empires they once threatened, far into the sunburned silence of the Sahara, another forgotten people carved a civilization into the dunes. Not on the banks of a river, nor along a fertile coast, but deep in the desert's heart. These were the Garamantes. The Garamantes, lords of the Sahara's hidden kingdom. In the vast emptiness of the Fezzan region of southwestern Libya, where golden dunes roll endlessly across the horizon and the sun pounds the sand into silence, lie ruins not easily seen. Crumbling stone walls, faint traces of dwellings, burial mounds, remnants of a city where no city should be. This is Jerma, once the capital of the Garamantean kingdom. Its stones rise from a place where life seems impossible, where rainfall is virtually non-existent, where summer heat can melt the air, and where the land, at first glance, offers nothing but dust. But more than 2,000 years ago, the Garamantes made it bloom. Roman sources mention them with a mixture of awe and disdain. To some, they were mysterious desert nomads, elusive and wild. To others, they were a threat, raiders mounted on swift chariots drawn by horses, vanishing into the sands before they could be caught. But Roman writers may have underestimated them. Modern archaeology tells a different story. Beneath the desert floor, in what appears to be barren land, lies a vast network of tunnels, fogaras, ancient underground channels that tapped into fossil aquifers deep beneath the Saharan sand. These channels, dug by hand, stretched for kilometers, gently sloping to bring water to the surface without evaporation. With this hidden water, the Garamantes created oases, palm groves, gardens, fields of barley and wheat. In an environment where survival alone would seem miraculous, they built a thriving urban society, complete with towns, cemeteries, trade networks, and social stratification. Some scholars estimate that the Garamantes sustained a population of tens of thousands across their territory. But who were they? Their origins are difficult to trace. Some theories suggest that they were descended from earlier Saharan populations that flourished before the desert hardened. Others believe they were a blend of Berber and sub-Saharan African peoples, forming a unique desert culture shaped by necessity and innovation. The Garamantes left behind little writing. Their own language has not survived, and they did not build monumental temples or carve grand inscriptions. Much of what we know comes from archaeology, grave goods, ceramics, wall foundations, and the remains of their underground irrigation systems. Still, what they accomplished is striking. They traded across long-distance routes, exchanging salt, slaves, and gold from sub-Saharan Africa for Roman glass, wine, and ceramics. Their settlements, spaced like pearls along the desert, served as crucial links between the Mediterranean world and the lands beyond the Sahel. They had social classes, they farmed, they even built multi-story buildings from stone and mud brick. And yet, they remained largely invisible to history until the late 20th century, when aerial photography and satellite imagery revealed the scale of their ancient water systems and settlements. What had once seemed like random patches of rubble became legible as a civilization. But with that discovery came questions. How did the Garamantes develop such advanced hydraulic engineering in isolation? Did they receive knowledge from Egypt, Carthage, or Rome? Or was this a local innovation born of sheer necessity? And how did they maintain stability in such an extreme environment for so long? Their decline, like their origins, is shrouded in uncertainty. By the 5th or 6th century CE, their cities had been abandoned. The fogaras fell into disuse, the oases dried. Some scholars point to climate change, a drop in groundwater levels that made agriculture unsustainable. Others suggest that the Garamantes, having exhausted the fossil water on which their society was built, were forced to scatter. The Romans had already labeled them a fading force centuries earlier, calling their cities ruined, even when they were likely still active. Was this a misunderstanding, or did the Romans sense the inevitable? More speculative theories suggest even stranger possibilities. Some propose that the Garamantes were keepers of forgotten desert knowledge, astronomers, mapmakers, or mystics who encoded their wisdom into the alignment of their settlements or their burial practices. Others have pointed to the suddenness of their disappearance and the apparent loss of their irrigation technology as a sign that something more disruptive, political, spiritual, or even environmental, may have occurred. But the evidence is scarce. The desert buries both truth and myth with equal ease. What remains today are the bones of their cities, the silent tunnels beneath the sand, and a legacy that challenges our assumptions. That in one of the harshest environments on Earth, people could build not only to survive, but to thrive. They were not nomads, not wanderers. They were architects of oases, masters of invisible rivers, and perhaps guardians of a knowledge we have not yet fully recovered. So we are left to wonder, how much lies still buried beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara, and what other civilizations might have bloomed, flourished, and vanished, hidden by a desert that forgets, but never truly erases? And as the silent irrigation tunnels of the Garamantes fade beneath the Sahara's relentless sands, we turn now to a hill in southeastern Turkey. Unassuming at first glance, but upon excavation, something extraordinary emerges. Not a city, nor a tomb, nor even a settlement, but something older, something that seems to rewrite our understanding of how civilization began. This is Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe, enigma of the first builders. The landscape is quiet, rolling hills under a wide Anatolian sky. No rivers run nearby. No fertile valley cradles the site. But at the summit of one particular mound, the earth gives way to megaliths, massive stone pillars arranged in deliberate circles, rising from the ground like the ribs of some forgotten beast. They are tall, monumental, some over 16 feet high, weighing up to 20 tons. Each is carved with animals, foxes, boars, snakes, vultures, and abstract symbols whose meanings are still debated. The stones face inward, arranged in circular enclosures, with two central pillars dominating each ring like silent sentinels. These carvings are not crude. They are precise, expressive, deliberate. And they are old, very old. Radiocarbon dating places Göbekli Tepe's construction as early as 9,600 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. That's more than 6,000 years before Stonehenge, and even earlier than the first known cities of Mesopotamia. This means Göbekli Tepe was built before the invention of pottery, before the domestication of animals, before the rise of agriculture. And this is where the mystery deepens. For decades, the prevailing belief among historians was that complex monumental architecture came after farming, that once humans settled and produced food surpluses, they had time to build temples, organize labor, and create religion. But Göbekli Tepe reverses that logic. Here is a vast ceremonial complex constructed by hunter-gatherers. No evidence of agriculture surrounds the site in its earliest layers. No signs of permanent domestic architecture. Just monumental ritual space. What compelled these early humans, still roaming the landscape in small groups, to gather, to quarry stone, to shape and carve it, and to erect it in massive symbolic formations? Who were they? We don't know their names. We don't know what language they spoke, if any. We don't even know what they called this place. And yet, they left behind something permanent, something that suggests belief, cooperation, memory. Göbekli Tepe may have been a religious center, a sacred gathering place, perhaps for seasonal rituals or communal events. Some archaeologists suggest that, rather than agriculture giving rise to religion, it may have been ritual that gave rise to agriculture, that the need to sustain gatherings at places like Göbekli Tepe may have led people to domesticate plants, to settle, to change the trajectory of human history. But that's not the only mystery. After centuries, perhaps millennia, of use, the site was deliberately buried, not destroyed, not left to decay. Buried, with care. Each enclosure was filled with earth and stone rubble, as though those who built it, or their descendants, wanted to preserve it, protect it, hide it. Why? Mainstream explanations range from shifts in belief systems to environmental changes, or the emergence of new centers elsewhere. But the intent behind the burial remains one of Göbekli Tepe's most compelling riddles. The deeper excavations go, the more enclosures are found, each older than the last. And beneath them, who knows? Even now, only a fraction of the site has been uncovered. Ground-penetrating radar suggests many more circles lie beneath the soil, and with every layer, we move further back into a time when written language didn't yet exist, when memory and meaning were carved into stone because there was no other way to record it. But what was recorded? Some researchers see the carved animals as spiritual symbols, totemic guardians, or representations of cosmological beliefs. Others believe they might represent constellations, an ancient star map encoded in stone. The twin central pillars of each circle could symbolize deities, ancestors, or mythical beings now lost to time. More speculative theories abound. Some suggest lost civilizations, now vanished from the archaeological record. Others see in Göbekli Tepe echoes of the antediluvian world described in ancient myths, a sacred place built by survivors of some forgotten cataclysm. Still others wonder if the builders possessed knowledge of astronomy, geometry, or symbolism that we've only recently begun to recover. But amidst the theories, what remains is the stone, unflinching, silent, real. Göbekli Tepe is not a myth. It is not a legend. It is a fact in stone, a monument that should not exist in the age it was built, and yet does. And it challenges every assumption we have about the dawn of human civilization. Who carved these animals into limestone before they had domesticated cattle? What stories were told beneath these towering pillars, long before the first cities rose? Why was this place built, and why was it buried? We may never know the full answer. But with every excavation, every unearthed carving, we come a step closer, not just to understanding Göbekli Tepe, but to understanding ourselves. And so we are left to wonder, what forgotten truths lie buried in the Anatolian soil, just beneath our feet? And if Göbekli Tepe is only the beginning, what else has time concealed, waiting for us to ask the right questions? And as we leave the carved monoliths of Göbekli Tepe, buried beneath the Anatolian soil, still whispering of a time before time, we rise now into the thin, crystalline air of the Andean highlands. At an altitude where the sky seems closer than the earth, and the breath of the land is sharp and rarefied, lie the silent remains of a city that defies explanation. A city older than the Inca, stranger than myth, and built with a precision that still stirs debate. This is Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku, the stone code of the high Andes. On the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, where the Andes roll into a vast, windswept plateau, lies a place where time feels disjointed, where the bones of the past protrude from the earth in silent defiance of erosion and memory. Tiwanaku does not shout its presence like the massive pyramids of Egypt or the sprawling ruins of Rome. It waits. Scattered across this sacred plain are enormous stones, hewn, carved, and placed with a precision that feels almost alien. The stones are not merely big, they are massive, some weighing over 100 tons. They are andesite and sandstone, dragged here from quarries miles away across treacherous terrain. Some are so finely cut that a modern razor blade cannot slip between the seams. But there is no mortar, no inscriptions in any known writing system, no surviving texts. And yet, the city speaks, through geometry, through symmetry, through silence. The most iconic structure is the Akapana Pyramid, a vast, stepped mound once thought to be a natural hill, but now revealed as an intricately constructed platform, complete with subterranean drainage systems and sacred chambers. Nearby lies the Kalasasaya, a walled temple whose massive vertical stones once framed rituals aligned to the solstices and equinoxes. But it is the Gate of the Sun that haunts the imagination. Carved from a single block of andesite, the gateway is adorned with an enigmatic figure, known as the Weeping God, or the Staff Deity, flanked by winged attendants, each bearing a staff or scepter. Their meaning? Unknown. Their story? Forgotten. What does this iconography represent? A deity of time, a solar god, an ancestral founder? Scholars continue to debate the significance of the motifs. Some interpret the gate as a calendrical system, encoding solar cycles and agricultural rhythms into its reliefs. Others see in it a sacred narrative, a visual mythology passed down through generations in stone. Mainstream archaeologists date Tiwanaku's rise to around 500 CE, though evidence of earlier ceremonial use reaches back perhaps to 1500 BCE. The civilization peaked between 600 and 1000 CE, extending its influence across large swaths of the Andean highlands and into what is now Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. But Tiwanaku was not an empire in the traditional sense. There were no conquest narratives, no militaristic iconography, no clear signs of violent expansion. Instead, Tiwanaku seems to have operated as a spiritual and cultural center, radiating influence through shared religious iconography, trade, and pilgrimage. Its ceramic styles, textiles, and architectural forms appear across the region, even in places without signs of direct control. But then, as with so many ancient cities, it fell. By 1100 CE, Tiwanaku was abandoned. The elite compounds were empty, the temples left to the wind. There is no record of war, no clear evidence of destruction. Climate change, a prolonged drought in the highlands, may have undermined the agricultural systems that supported the city. The finely tuned raised fields and canal networks, so vital to Tiwanaku's sustenance, failed. And yet, the abruptness still puzzles researchers. Why did such an advanced and interconnected culture not adapt? Why was a place so central to Andean identity simply left behind? Even more intriguing is what they left unfinished. At the site of Pumapunku, a part of the Tiwanaku complex, lie the shattered remnants of what was perhaps the most ambitious construction project in pre-Columbian South America. Immense stone blocks are strewn across the site, some intricately cut with perfect right angles and finely drilled holes, suggesting an astonishing level of stoneworking skill. Some have called it the Andean Stonehenge. Others say it feels like a stone puzzle, the pieces too advanced for their time. But how were these stones moved? How were they carved with such exactness, without the use of iron tools or the wheel? Mainstream archaeology proposes the use of stone tools, patient labor, and clever engineering. Andesite, a hard volcanic rock, can be worked with hammerstones and sand over time. Ramps, sledges, and rope systems could have helped move blocks from quarries to the site. But not everyone is convinced. The precision of the cuts, the seamless interlocking joints, the sheer scale. These features have inspired a wave of more speculative theories, some invoking forgotten technologies, others suggesting lost knowledge systems passed down from earlier, unknown civilizations. Some even posit astronomical or mathematical codes hidden in the layout, connecting Tiwanaku to solstices, lunar cycles, or constellations. Still others go further into the fringe, proposing links to vanished antediluvian cultures, extraterrestrial contact, or ancient survivors of global cataclysms. While these ideas often lack empirical support, their persistence reflects the feeling that Tiwanaku is a site that does not fully explain itself. It's not just what's there, it's what's missing. No written records, no libraries, no detailed tombs of kings or elaborate genealogies. Tiwanaku seems to exist outside the normal arc of empire, a city not of dominance, but of devotion, and perhaps of deeper knowing. So we are left to ask, what did the builders of Tiwanaku know about the stars, the stones, and the spirit of the land? And why did they leave when everything they created was designed to last forever? Beneath the cold, high-altitude sun, the stones still stand, silent, aligned, waiting. And somewhere, perhaps in the soil or the geometry, or the echo of wind through broken gateways, the answers are still there. And as the sacred stones of Tiwanaku continue their quiet vigil beneath the high Andean sky, we shift our gaze to the heart of Eurasia, a region less defined by monuments and more by movement. Here, across the shifting sands and snow-capped ranges of Central Asia, a people once thrived not by conquering, but by connecting. Their cities were crossroads, their language, a passport, their influence, subtle yet far-reaching. These were the Sogdians, forgotten merchants of the Silk Road. In the shadow of the Zaravshan Mountains, Beneath the ochre dust of present-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan lie the scattered remains of ancient cities, Samarkand, Panjakent, Bukhara. Stone foundations, collapsed walls, fading murals. To the casual observer, these ruins may seem ordinary, yet in their time, they were the pulse points of one of history's most intricate networks. At the height of their influence, between the 4th and 8th centuries CE, the Sogdians were not empire builders in the conventional sense. They did not erect pyramids, nor did they command vast armies. Instead, they became the invisible thread stitching together empires and continents. They were traders, diplomats, translators, storytellers. But who were they, truly? The Sogdians were an Eastern Iranian people whose cities flourished along the central arteries of the Silk Road. Their language became the lingua franca of commerce across Central Asia, from the courts of the Tang dynasty in China to the markets of Persia and beyond. They carried silk, spices, gems, and glass, but also music, religion, and ideas. Sogdian merchants carved routes through deserts and across mountain passes, enduring bandits, blizzards, and imperial politics. In Chinese records, they were both admired and mistrusted, foreigners with uncanny charm and persuasive tongues. In some accounts, they are portrayed as entertainers and artists. In others, as clever negotiators and daring entrepreneurs. Their caravans reached Luoyang, Chang'an, and Dunhuang in the east, Byzantium and the Levant in the west. And yet, for all their mobility, their roots ran deep. In Panjakent, once a thriving Sogdian city, archaeologists have uncovered homes with richly decorated walls. Frescoes depict banquets, dancers, and mythic tales drawn from Zoroastrian, Hindu, and even local Central Asian traditions. The scenes blend Iranian epic with Indian iconography, Chinese brushwork with Greco-Roman motifs. What kind of worldview created such a blend? Their religion, too, was fluid. Zoroastrianism dominated, but Buddhism, Manichaeism, Nestorian Christianity, and later Islam all found places in Sogdian society. They were cultural bridges in human form, absorbing and transmitting beliefs without erasing their own. But then, as with so many great cultural currents, they vanished. By the 10th century, the Sogdians as a distinct group began to dissolve into the broader Islamic world. Their language faded. Their cities were absorbed or forgotten. Their names, once known in foreign courts, disappeared from record. Why? The Arab conquests of Central Asia in the 7th and 8th centuries reshaped the region. Islam became dominant. Trade routes shifted. The Sogdian identity, tied to a world of multiculturalism and religious pluralism, began to erode. Yet their disappearance feels disproportionate to their influence. Unlike other vanished civilizations, the Sogdians did not collapse in war nor fall to natural disaster. They did not leave behind towering temples or massive tombs. Instead, they seem to have faded, quietly, gently, into the fabric of the societies they once helped connect. And this is where the mystery begins. Because despite their role in linking empires and shaping one of the most consequential trade networks in history, the Sogdians are largely absent from popular memory. Their story, until recently, was known only through fragments, scattered manuscripts, Chinese edicts, and the silent walls of abandoned cities. But the more we uncover, the more intriguing the picture becomes. One of the most significant discoveries was made in 1907, deep within the caves of Dunhuang along the Silk Road. A trove of scrolls, hidden for centuries, included Sogdian texts, letters, contracts, and religious writings. They spoke of daily life and long journeys, of merchants stranded and longing for home. Their handwriting was delicate, their voices clear. Why were these letters hidden? Were they preserved intentionally or forgotten in haste? Some suggest that the Sogdians were more than traders, that they functioned as unofficial diplomats and intelligence agents, navigating the volatile politics of empires through soft power. Others propose they served as cultural emissaries, deliberately spreading religions and ideologies as part of a broader strategy, one not orchestrated by governments, but by networks of trust and kinship. And then there are the deeper questions. How did the Sogdians learn to thrive in between powers, always adapting, never dominating? What enabled them to balance so many belief systems, languages, and customs without losing cohesion? Was their apparent disappearance really a fading, or an intentional transformation? Some scholars argue that the Sogdians never truly vanished, that their descendants blended into Persian, Turkic, and Chinese communities, that their ideas, art, and trade practices continued under new names, hidden in plain sight. The Silk Road was never a single route, but a living web. The Sogdians moved through it like blood through capillaries, unseen, essential, and enduring. Today, as archaeologists continue to unearth murals and manuscripts, as linguists work to reconstruct Sogdian grammar and vocabulary, a culture long relegated to the margins is beginning to speak again. And so we are left to ask, what other silent architects of history have we overlooked? And if the Sogdians could travel so far, connect so much, and leave so little behind, what else might be hidden, waiting to be rediscovered, not in monuments of stone, but in the stories we forgot